What's up, everybody, and welcome into the first NFL preview show of the 2024 NFL season here at PFF, where we are going to be going through every single game, every single week, every single Thursday, PFF style. We're going to be giving you a matchup that matters. We're going to be talking about plus factors, X factors, whatever you want to call them, breaking this game down as best we possibly can in every single way. I'm Trevor Sikkema, but you guys already know that. You see my face way too much on this channel. The other new face on the other side of the screen is the one and only Carmen Vitali, my good friend who is joining me this year to help with the preview shows. I'm very thankful for that because I could not do it on my own. And Carmen, you were our first call, and you had to be because you're fantastic at what you do. Carmen, I appreciate you joining me here on this show and every single week this season. How are you doing, my friend?
Oh my God, I'm so incredibly excited. I'm so incredibly honored. Trev, you and I go way back, and to get this call was like, I was so stoked, just incredibly stoked, because there's nothing I love more than talking ball, and there's nothing I love more than nerding out. And this is the perfect place to do it.
Started on the sidelines of practice down in Tampa Bay in the sweltering heat. That's where we cut our teeth. And now here we are covering the whole league for PFF. Carmen does such fantastic work covering the NFL and so much more for Fox Sports. You hear her on Fox Sports Radio. You see her on Fox Sports on television as well. So we're just very happy to have her here now as part of the PFF family. Carmen, scale 1 to 10, how hyped are you for the season? I actually talked about this with Dalton earlier in the week. Like, sometimes the first game takes me a little bit of time to get used to. Like, I'm like a quarter through the Thursday night kickoff game, and I'm like, oh yeah, wait, this isn't preseason. Like, this stuff actually matters. So, I mean, like, where are you on the scale? How excited are you for this?
I'm just thrilled to be done with all of the predicting and the prognostication and all of that kind of stuff, because that just gets so monotonous, I feel like, after a while, because you also know that at the end of the day, you're probably not going to be right, because the NFL, for as much as we think we know about it, it's completely unpredictable, which is part of its charm. So I'm so excited. And like, we're getting hit in the mouth with like matchups to start out the season, like to start out with Chiefs Ravens, and then to go immediately the next day into Packers Eagles. Like, yeah, these could literally be like the two championship games at the end of the season, like previews for the championship games at the end of the season. We're so lucky. We're so
NFL
lucky.
Schedule makers. They know what they're doing. They know how to reel you in. They know how to, whether you're a diehard or you're just, dipping your toe in the water. I mean, the second the ball gets kicked off this Thursday, I mean, there's just, there's no stopping it. It's going to be a snowball and an avalanche, and it's all football from that moment forward. We got a lot of games.
Today. It's tonight, Trev. Like, it's not this Thursday. It's tonight.
And technically, I wasn't wrong. It's in a couple of hours. Technically, I wasn't wrong. It is Thursday, but Thursday is in fact today. You're right. I need to get my hype up. I need to match your level here for the excitement. We're going to dig into all of these games, and we got a lot, because obviously season's kicking off. There's no bye weeks for any of these teams, so we got a lot of games that we're going to preview. We're going to get to our favorite matchups and everything. But first, a word from our friends over at Fabric. As parents, we all want our kids to grow up, be happy, successful, financially independent, right? Well, with a UGMA account from Fabric by Gerber Life, now you're arming your child with a powerful financial tool to help shape their journey towards financial success. A UGMA account stands for Uniform Gifts to Minors Act. While your kids can't invest while they're minors, a UGMA account actually allows you to invest on their behalf and gives their investments more time to grow. It's a great thing. No contribution limits, multiple tax advantages, SIPC insured up to $500,000, no commission fees, just a low flat monthly fee. Fabric is partnered with Gerber Life, which is a name that has been trusted by millions of families like yours for over 50 years. So join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families and start investing in your child's future today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL, MEET fabric.com/PFF. NFL portfolios are managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Monthly minimum contributions are required. Learn more at meetfabric.com. Carmen, let's get it kicked off with the game today, which is Thursday, today. And it could be an AFC Championship preview. It could be a divisional round preview. It could be, we could very well see these teams in the playoffs again, like we saw them last year. It's Chiefs Ravens. This one's in Kansas City. Carmen, I'm going to ask you first. As the guest, I'm going to give you the first crack at what your matchup that matters is here for this game.
My matchup that matters, and I think it's probably an obvious one, is Derrick Henry against the Chiefs defensive box. Pause. here's the thing.
5 minutes in the show, we already get the first pause.
I know. Well, I have it written out as like the Chiefs box, so I was like, pause. Sorry, guys. As you guys get to know me, you'll know that my humor is that of a 12-year-old boy's. But anyway, back to what's happening on the field here. There's been so much made about pairing Lamar Jackson with Derrick Henry, and rightfully so. I think we need to really understand, though, why that's so dangerous schematically, because when you're looking at having two dynamic runners that the defense has to account for, you're essentially getting the benefit of trotting out 21 personnel, but not having to sacrifice a receiver to do it. That's insane to me. And it makes my brain hurt thinking about how you try to defend that. Sure, because theoretically, you have, again, those two runners in Derrick Henry and now Lamar Jackson, but then you also have, you can't take away a defensive back in the back end because you could still have three receivers on the field. And oh, by the way, Mark Andrews being one of the best receiving tight ends in football.
Yeah.
It's an absolutely just impossible situation for a defense going against it. I'm so excited to see how defenses try to contend with it, and Spags is going to get the first crack at it. The thing is, too, loading the box against Derrick Henry doesn't exactly always work.
Right.
Against 8-man boxes, he's faced the most 8-man boxes, first of all, because I think that's everybody's first inclination is like, oh, this man is a cargo plane of a player. Let's try and load the box against him. And then he, in turn, has the most yards after contact against 8-man boxes. It's the next closest player is Christian McCaffrey. And like Derrick Henry had 446 yards after contact in 8-man boxes. Christian McCaffrey had 360. So there is a large discrepancy, even accounting for the fact that Derrick Henry faces these more than most.
Yeah.
On top of that, the Chiefs don't really run a lot of 8-man boxes. They prefer kind of just the standard 7-man.
Sure.
I don't know how, again, that's going to necessarily work out. It's going to work out on the back level when you talk about the Ravens passing attack. But then at the same time, I feel like Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry are going to be able to carve you up underneath. And it might not be flashy and it might not be sexy, but they're going to get 5 yards every single time, at least, underneath. And they can just kind of move down the field that way. So how the Chiefs decide to contend with Derrick Henry with Lamar Jackson is going to be very, very interesting. I think it's going to just hinge on that front seven, but I'd be lying if I told you I knew what they were going to do with the front seven. I just know it's going to have to be them.
Yeah, look, I think that's a major point of this game. There's no doubt about it. And how they deploy their tight ends, I think it's going to be interesting. The Ravens, because it's not like Derrick Henry didn't come from a smash mouth type of football place before under Mike Vrabel, but Todd Monken's the offensive coordinator for the Ravens. You and I know Todd Monken really well from when he was the offensive coordinator of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they used a combination of Cam Brate and OJ Howard very, very well. And so it's like he's not going to be afraid to get creative with those guys as well, where, like you said, you could still be in a power offensive formation and pass the football. So a lot of sort of like in theory success is there for this Ravens offense with Derrick Henry. And of course, like you said, how he sets the tone against whatever the Chiefs go-to run-stopping formation is, whether it's an 8-man box, whether it's a 7-man box, whatever, that's going to go a long way into this game. My matchup that matters, I'm sort of going to stay on that side of the football, but I'm going to get more detailed with an exact player versus player. Zay Flowers, the Ravens wide receiver, versus Trent McDuffie, the Chiefs cornerback. McDuffie's now taking over those full CB1 duties with L'Jarius Sneed now gone on the Tennessee Titans. And McDuffie was you could see that he was sort of on that rise last year. 80.8 coverage grade last season. He played on the outside. He played over 600 snaps on the outside. He played over 300 snaps in the slot. So really versatile in that way. And Zay Flowers sort of mirrored that. Like he was the go-to guy for the Ravens passing attack, at least from the wide receiver spot. Flowers, if you include the playoffs, had over 1,000 yards receiving. The next closest wide receiver was Odell Beckham Jr., and he didn't even have 600. So like it wasn't even close. It was sort of like what you're saying, like Derrick Henry not even close to whoever was in second place. Zay Flowers to whoever was in second place in this receiving game wasn't even close. And so I think an X factor will definitely be when the Ravens go to pass, are they still able to rely on Zay Flowers to be their guy, even with Trent McDuffie being the primary player who's covering him? Whoever wins that matchup, I think, could go a long way into who wins this one. But outside of the Derrick Henry factor, Who's your plus factor? We'll do that for every single game, by the way, guys. We'll give you a matchup that matters, and then we'll sort of also throw in a plus factor here. It's like an X factor, but, look, PFF Plus subscription. You see how it goes? Synergy. That's what we're trying to do around here, folks. But who is your plus factor here for the
my plus factor is, again, a group of people, unfortunately, but it's a group of people that acts as one, and it's the Ravens offensive line, because that's how you unlock all of this. That's how you give Lamar Jackson time to throw on top of blocking for Derrick Henry, because even dump trucks need blocking. Apparently,
it's true.
And this is a unit that suffered some losses in the offseason, and I really want to see if we're overblowing that or not. I've been kind of in the camp that I think they're going to figure it out. But they're going against a pretty formidable opponent to get out the gate in the Chiefs D line, trying to contend with Chris Jones up there. So I really think that it's all going to hinge on how well the Ravens offensive line can sustain the departures that it had, and see like what that looks like and how much they really need to be involved for Lamar Jackson and for Derrick Henry to still have success. I tend to think, again, we were overblowing it because you saw what Derrick Henry was able to do in Tennessee with varying degrees of offensive line play. It's just, I think it's one of those things where I don't think we were talking about enough about the losses that they sustained. And so I want to see what it looks like now.
Yeah, Roger Rosengarten specifically getting into this lineup, it's like he isn't that type of Ravens offensive lineman we're used to. Like, he's more of a finesse pass blocker, and they kind of like road graders. So how he fits into this, I think you're right. It's going to be a big deal. My plus factor is Mahomes. Wow, shocker, Trev.
Shocker.
Starting off with a deep cut here. Glad we needed PFF subscriptions for this one, buddy. No, okay, but I am going to go a little bit deeper. Okay, I am going to get into the PFF stats and advanced things here for Mahomes. In 2023, this is tough to believe when I saw this. Mahomes completed just 18 passes when targeting a receiver 20 or more yards down the field. Just one touchdown. All regular season, one touchdown when throwing the ball more than 20 yards down the field. Like, that was a major part of the first 3 years when he was in Kansas City of their game. And I don't think they had the personnel to do that. I think they really made that an emphasis this past offseason, but do we see it right away here? Are they able to attack deep like they were during the first 3 years of the Mahomes and the Chiefs era? Because it has not been like that the last 3 years, and specifically last year, they were not able to do it. So I think that is something that we've got to watch out for. Will they be able to attack the field deeper down the field? The next game that we're getting to, it is that Friday night game, Eagles versus Packers. This is a special one. This one is in Brazil. Tried to say that like Vin Diesel from Fast and Furious. I don't know how close that I got to that one, but
not close. Right. Sorry, Trev.
It's all right. Sao Paulo is where this is played. Eagles, Packers. How do we feel about this one, Carmen? What is your matchup that matters for these two teams?
Shocker of shockers again. I'm going with the trenches, especially given these two teams, though. The Eagles are so they're known for both sides of the ball. Packers, we're going to see. But the Kenny Clark kind of interior defensive line rotation of the Green Bay Packers against the interior of the Eagles O-line in particular, given the fact that they lost Jason Kelce. And if you think about what has been the Eagles' signature play over the last couple seasons now, it's been the tush push. And while Jalen Hurts gets a lot of credit for that, I think that, hey, Jason Kelce probably deserves more. And if you talk to any offensive lineman, which I have over and over again when this first became a thing, every single one of them told me it really has more to do with the center. And it really has more to do with Jason Kelce and to why they're so successful. And that's why other teams haven't been able to replicate it at the success rate that the Eagles had. And offensive linemen too, they're not self-serving. They're not going to tell me something just to kind of inflate their own importance or position, because they know how important they are and they know that they're not going to get the credit they deserve. So looking at that and how, the O-line allowed the second fewest sacks in the league last year, the Eagles O-line did. Is that going to continue without your anchor in the center? I'm really concerned about it, especially given the fact that we've heard from Green Bay and out of Green Bay that in Jeff Hafley's new 4-3 defense, by the way, something that hasn't been seen in Green Bay in 15 years. Yeah. This is a really aggressive unit. It hinges a lot on the safety position more than anything, but it does require a lot of push up front. So Kenny Clark is really excited to do that, as are the defensive ends. But I think in particular, the interior is where you're going to see if this Eagles offensive line can really make up for the fact that they lost one of, if not the best centers ever in football.
I think that's a really good call out. And I like the back and forth that we got going here. You're talking about trenches first. I'm going to talk about a skill position player matchup because Jair Alexander is really big for what the Packers want to do. You mentioned how important safety is. I think that Xavier McKinney was one of the most impactful free agency signings that we saw exactly because of what you said in Jeff Hafley's defense. He is so important to being able to play cover one like they want to. But you know what else is very important to playing cover one? Corners who can play man coverage, right? You've got to be able to play. You've got to be able to have faith in your corners at that point. And when you play man coverage against Philadelphia Eagles, that's a daunting task because it's Devontae Smith, it's AJ Brown, right? And when you look at Jair Alexander's PFF grades over the last 4 seasons, I mean, they've been pretty strong. Last year was a little bit lower at 75.9, but the year before 80.3, the year before 73.4, but he only played 200 snaps, so that's a little different. You go back to 2020, an elite 90.7, so we know what Jair Alexander is capable of. Can he truly take away one of those two studs for the Eagles, so much so that the cover one schemes that they really want to run, they can, and they have an effective game plan for it, and they're able to really do what Jeff Hafley has done for a lot of times throughout his career. So that matchup to me is really, really important as well. What about a plus factor for you? Who's a plus factor in this game?
Shocker of shocker, it's Saquon Barkley for the Philadelphia Eagles, because say Jair Alexander is able to take away either AJ Brown or Devontae Smith, you now have a guy in the backfield that can be a factor in that underneath kind of check down receiving game, or can also just kind of bulldoze people, provided the Eagles offensive line keeps up with what we're used to seeing from them. And I think that Saquon Barkley, the addition of him is just providing such a dynamic component to this Eagles offense. Again, shocker of shockers, but that is going to, in much in the way that Derrick Henry helps Lamar Jackson. I mean, Jalen Hurts is a good runner too. And we've seen him on design runs as well. And so adding Saquon Barkley to this, I think it's to a lesser degree than what you're going to see in Baltimore, but it is going to present defenses with a really hard decision to make, especially when you also have those two incredible wide receivers that are both wide receiver ones, if we're being honest, on that Eagles offense. So I'm riding with Saquon Barkley. It's going to be really weird to see him in an Eagles uniform.
It is, yeah.
But I mean, I think he's going to pay dividends for what this offense wants to do, especially under Kellen Moore as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a huge addition. There's no doubt about it, because you touched on Jason Kelce not being there, major factor. It is. There's no doubt about it. But just as a whole, this Eagles offensive line has been one of the best in the NFL over the last 3 to 4 years. Last 2 years, they've had 2 different lead backs in Miles Sanders and then DeAndre Swift. Both of them got over 1,000 yards rushing. And I think that most would tell you, except maybe Miles Sanders and DeAndre Swift, who, you know, I wouldn't want them to because of competitiveness, but I think most would tell you that Saquon Barkley is better and that you have more faith in him to be able to do more things for your offense. And so he seems to be the talk of the town. They absolutely love that this dude is in the offense, and we'll see. We'll see if it could have like that Christian McCaffrey type of effect, right? When he went over to the 49ers and they just used him in basically every way his skill sets and his talents allowed them to. And we've seen him play at an unbelievably high level because of it, because of the offense that he is in. I hope we get that from Saquon, because we haven't seen that elite play from him since 2018, that rookie season. And I think that we got the best year yet coming up. Packers, man, that offensive side of the football is going to be so much fun. We talked all off season about how great Jordan Love was to end the season, really second half of the season. He got super comfortable, super confident in that offense. And I think the pass catchers, the wide variety of pass catchers is a big reason why. You got the 2 tight ends, but also you got Jaden Reed, you got Romeo Doubs, you got Dontavian Wicks, you got Christian Watson. I'm going to say my plus factor is Dontavia Wicks, because when I looked at this team, Dalton made a really good point when we were going through our division previews that, funny enough, when we think about a quarterback playing their best, we think about average depth of targets going up, right? They're not afraid to push the ball deep down the field. They're willing to attack the field in ways that are in the intermediate and deep levels like they weren't previously. But it was funny. I thought him pointing this out was really great by him. Jordan Love's average depth of target actually went down a little bit when he was playing really like his best ball, his best football last year. And it was because he was more confident to deliver the ball anywhere. He didn't feel like he had to force it deep down the field. He felt like he could attack, in the shorter areas and really get the ball in these guys' hands in space and then allowing them to become playmakers. When you start to do that more, then it's just, it becomes like one chess move after the other. Now the deep balls open up even more. And I think that we saw that specifically from Dontavian Wicks. Week 10 on, Wicks had the highest receiving grade of any of those receivers, and he had a 22.3 threat percentage, which you'll hear us talk about here on this show. It's basically wide receiver usage. How often are you being targeted per route that you run when you were out there? 22.3%. It was the second highest on the team. And he had 19 explosive plays on just 66 targets during that time as well. So this is somebody who they love to go. Shoot, he played, I think, one snap this preseason. And guess what it was? Deep ball, touchdown. Boom. Touchdown. All right, we're good. Get to the regular season. We don't need to see any more from you. So I think that connection with Wicks is going to be a big one here for Jordan Love. A lot of people are expecting a lot from Jordan Love, and you understand it. He's going to be in that MVP conversation, especially early on, and it could start on Friday against the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll see.
I do think too that, given the sheer amount of weapons that Jordan Love has, Dontavian Wicks went often overlooked by defenses because there's only so many guys that you can defend, and at that point, he's a rookie. There's not really a lot of tape on him. What do you like? Are you really concerned about Dontavian Wicks at this point when you thought the focal point was going to be Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson? That wasn't the case. Jane Reed led the team, all that kind of stuff, but we saw it. I saw it firsthand at that Dallas playoff game where just the defense didn't know where to turn at that point. And Jordan Love knew his offense well enough at that point where he can get the ball out to anyone because he's comfortable with all of these guys. And Matt LaFleur is apparently allergic or wants to vomit when he hears the words wide receiver one.
Yeah, I get it. From all the ranking season, and we contributed to that a little bit. Sorry, Matt. I can understand it. He's probably like you, just excited to get out there and play football. Darlene in the chat says Green Bay Packers are going to win on Friday night. How do I not ride with Darlene? That kind of confidence, man. That's really what you're looking for. Okay, let's move on to the next game. Those are the two games that we have before Sunday. We got a large Sunday slate of games. Like I said, no bye week, so we got a lot to get to. The first one we're talking about, Steelers Falcons. Falcons were the big talk of the town with how they went in the free agency period, bringing in Kirk Cousins, and then they remained the talk of the town because they still went quarterback at the first round. But how is it going to all play out on the field this year? What is your matchup that matters here for Steelers Falcons at 1:00?
I'm going base formation. If you're going Zach Frazier against Grady Jarrett, and Zach Frazier, really loved him coming out of West Virginia. I think he's a great center, and he was my little center draft crush, I want to say, but he's going against a veteran in Grady Jarrett, kind of in that base formation, like I said, on the interior. I do appreciate that. All right, you're starting Russell Wilson. He's a veteran in this league. These are the types of teams and situations where you can get away with having a rookie center because you're not putting a ton on their plate. You're not asking a rookie center to make the checks, to kind of make the shifts and ID the mic and do all these kind of things that veteran centers will do. So I like that pairing, and I think you can afford to do it. But at the same time, this is still a new system for Russell Wilson. And I think that taking as much off of his plate probably would have been a better call. I don't know how this is going to go in Steelerland. I had to talk a lot about, just between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields and kind of figuring out if there was actually a competition there. I don't believe there was, but we have not seen the Russell Wilson of old in years. And I think this was a conversation between two bottom third quarterbacks, not to mention Russell Wilson was one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the league last year. He took 45 sacks. So it's because that he's not getting the ball out very quickly. He does rely on his offensive line incredibly much to hold that pocket. And when you have a rookie anchoring it, that's going to, it just gives me pause. And I think that Grady Jarrett's going to get the better of him, as are the rest of the Falcons' defensive line. I'm scared. I'm scared for the young guy.
Yeah, no, I can understand because I love what the Steelers are doing on the offensive line. Like, I love the emphasis, the investments that they have made. I think Zach Frazier's a great pick. Broderick Jones kind of struggled a little bit, certainly in the preseason, but I think he could be a good starter in this league. You drafted Troy Fautanu as well, who I think could be a good starter. Yeah. You have Mason McCormick sort of waiting in the wings to be another interior offensive line starter. So 4 out of your 5 offensive linemen of the future are kind of on the team already. And so you love that. You love that investment, but is that going to be good this year,
right,
we'll see. My plus factor kind of goes into that a little bit, so I'll kind of revisit this in a couple of minutes. But my matchup that matters, one of them is Caleb McGarry, the right tackle of the Atlanta Falcons, versus TJ Watt, the absolute monster pass rusher for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, the Steelers can get after you in a lot of different ways. I think Keanu Benton's in for a really great year at the interior defensive line. Cam Hayward has just been a stud throughout his entire career, just signed an extension, so we know that he is locked in and good to go. Alex Highsmith also played great last season too, so it's going to be coming at Kirk Cousins from all different angles, but specifically McGarry against TJ Watt. And when you look at those like money downs, if you will, the third downs, the fourth downs when you got to go for it, McGarry's pass blocking grade on those obvious passing situations, 59.0 pass blocking grade last year on third and fourth downs was McGarry. TJ Watt, 38 pressures on third and fourth down alone, tied for third in the NFL. And so specifically, that's going to mean a lot because I think a lot of people went into this offseason, myself included, praising the Falcons offensive line because it is a really great unit. Last year, specifically running the football, Chris Lindstrom might be the best run blocking player in the NFL. Drew Dahlman played very well in that category. McGarry was good in that category. Jake Matthews is as well. And so it was a really great run blocking offensive line. Pass blocking, that wasn't exactly at the same level. And so that's a little bit where I'm worried when it comes to the Falcons because it's still going to be game one for Kirk Cousins. He's going to be coming off that Achilles. He's not the most mobile dude in the world anyways. Is that matchup going to be more towards the Steelers' favor than people are giving it credit for? And I feel like some of the numbers lean to that being the case. But who's your plus factor in this game?
It's got to be Bijan Robinson because I need to see what Zach Robinson is going to do with him at this point. It's so interesting to me when you kind of break down the stats from last year. 51 of his rushes gained a first down, which was tied for 13th in the league. Go over to his 24 catches that gained a first down, which was third in the league. And I'm like, all right, why aren't we feeding Bijan the ball through the air a little bit more? And is that going to happen under Zach Robinson rather? I want to see what Bijan is going to look like because I think that the Falcons offense has the potential to be so dynamic when you take into account, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson. You have every which skill set to lean on if you're Kirk Cousins, who, like you said, isn't really a mobile guy. Get Bijan Robinson out in space. Let him be the mobile one that's zigging and zagging and doing all of that kind of stuff. I think that especially against this Steelers defense, you're going to need to get him out into space. And I would like to see more of those kind of short yardage passes to just kind of get him out into the flat, do kind of that kind of stuff, get away from that Steelers defensive line. And I think that's going to be the case for Atlanta throughout the season and it just starting week one.
Yeah, from your lips to fantasy owners, hopefully.
I know everybody was like fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, like that's what everybody wants to see. I feel like that was a big, point of contention with Arthur Smith. I can't remember exactly what his words were. He was basically like, I don't give a damn about your fantasy football team last year, but they had too many great players to be as inept on offense. And granted, lowest passing grade of any team in the NFL last year. And so, Desmond Ridder, Taylor Heineke, it wasn't all Arthur Smith's fault, but it's got to look better. And obviously that I think it will in a lot of ways. For my plus factor, I got to go back to the Pittsburgh Steelers to sort of piggyback off of the point that you made with Russell Wilson and holding on to the ball quite a bit and having a little bit of a makeshift offensive line that's sort of figuring things out, whether it's the youthfulness, whether they got to bounce back from how they played last year. When you look at this receiver group, George Pickens has got to have a monster game for this team because I don't know who else does.
No.
George Pickens had over 1,000 yards receiving last year. Deontay Johnson was second with just over 700. The next closest was Jalen Warren, and he had like 370. I mean, there was just nobody else. Now, I like Roman Wilson. I like that they drafted Roman Wilson. We didn't get to see him in the preseason because he was banged up, but I think that he will be a good player for this team. But you look at the rest of this roster here as it stands, and it's George Pickens, it's Van Jefferson, it's Calvin Austin, Scotty Miller. Somebody's got to separate. Do they have anybody who could separate early to even allow Russell Wilson to get the ball out of his hands quicker than what we have seen over the last couple of years, which we think has been a catalyst towards sort of his low passing grades and him not looking like the Russell Wilson of old? So I feel like just out of necessity, there's going to be a handful of, Gotta just throw it to Pickens, and he just throws it up there. And thankfully, Pickens is a monster at contested catches. Steelers might need one or two of those. He might need to truly have one of his best games of the season for the Steelers to be victorious here on the road against the Falcons. Next game, Arizona Cardinals. A little bit of a sleeper team on the rise here this season, going up against the Buffalo Bills, who have some questions to answer after this roster looks so different than it has from years past, specifically last season. So what do you think about this one? What's the matchup that matters for Cardinals Bills?
Yeah, I mean, an obvious one is to take into account Marvin Harrison Jr. and who he's going to be matched up against, which I have to assume is going to be Rasul Douglas on that Bills team. Got to see Rasul with the Packers for the last couple of years before he was traded in the middle of last season. That was a huge hit to the Packer locker room. I think Rasul Douglas went criminally overrated, or underrated, I should say. He was 20th in coverage grade among all players with at least 25 targets last season for two different teams. So 5 INTs last year. He did allow 23 first downs, but I think that now that he has the stability and he's more familiar with the scheme and stuff like that, he's going to be a formidable opponent for someone like Marvin Harrison Jr. But Marvin Harrison Jr. is Marvin Harrison Jr. He was the most highly touted wide receiver coming out of this draft class. And the fact that he's going to have Kyler Murray feeding him the ball, this is going to be just really fun to watch, first of all. And I really do think that this game is going to go as that matchup goes entirely.
I think Kyler's going to cook this season. So many
people. I feel like I still need to see it. I don't know. I make the case for me here, Trev, because I'm like, I want it to happen. And I know fantasy owners want it to happen.
So when last time he was fully healthy, it would have been the 2021 season. I get it. It's a long time ago. I get it. But MVP level stuff, his big time throw percentage that season was 8%. That's nuts. Bonkers. And his turnover worthy play percentage was fantastic as well. I think it was barely above 2%. Those are really good numbers, especially when you look at the gap between those two things. He was an MVP player. Now, how he started the next year, that 2022 season, not as strong before he ended up tearing his ACL, misses a bunch of time there, comes back last year. You're getting over the injury. He only played from week 10 on anyways. But this year, I feel like he can hit the ground running again. I'm a big Michael Wilson guy, just as I am a Marvin Harrison Jr. guy. Trey McBride's one of the best receiving tight ends in the game. I like James Conner. I like Trey Benson. Like I want to be in. I really do. I think that this is a team that even last year, when the roster was not good, they played spoiler to some teams, especially early in the season. It gave me some faith in Jonathan Gannon being the head coach. But that kind of gets into the one position that I didn't talk about on the offense and my matchup that matters. It's the Arizona Cardinals offensive line against the Bills defensive line, specifically Paris Johnson Jr., probably going up against Greg Rousseau for a good portion of the game. Paris Johnson Jr., not great to start the year last year. Weeks 1 through 9 had a pass blocking grade of 56.7. Not good. But from week 10 to week 18, which was exactly when Kyler Murray came back, a little bit more chemistry, a little bit more dynamic feel to the offense, 71.4. I think he was one of the best pass blockers on the team, so we love to see that. But Rousseau's been getting better as a pass rusher each year. Pass rush win percentage of 17.8 and 16.0 over these last two seasons, respectively. So that's going to be a major matchup. Which version of Paris Johnson Jr. are we getting against the Bills? Because that's one that's sort of tough for Kyler to get over, no matter how many passing weapons you have to throw to, if you really can't hold on the ball the way that you need to get those guys open. What about a plus factor that you have in this one, though?
Yeah, it's, again, shocker. It's going to be James Cook, because I think that James Cook is going to be the key to the Buffalo offense, at least in the beginning of the season, given the fact that Josh Allen is going to have to get his rapport with young receivers, namely Keon Coleman, make sure that he can be your wide receiver one after both Steph and Gabe Davis are gone. So James Cook, I think also, we didn't give enough credence to what he did last year and the steps he took forward last year, not only in the rushing game where he had over 1,100 yards, but then in the receiving game too. He had another extra 400 yards on, through the air. He had 4 touchdowns, receiving touchdowns versus just 2 rushing. I don't think we've seen the ceiling with James Cook either. And I think that's what we're going to need to see this season, and starting with the Arizona Cardinals, who, by the way, were dead last in run defense grade last year. That's another reason why, like, I'm willing it for the Cardinals, but this has been a tragically bad especially running rush defense. You haven't had much more in pass defense. Like their defense just hasn't been there and hasn't been reliable to help out the offense. So I think that there's a huge opportunity for James Cook to kind of hit the ground running and take the pressure off of Josh Allen, elevating his receivers immediately. And this is a really good opportunity to do that.
Yeah, you're talking just about the front seven and how they weren't great in run defense. I think my plus factor could have been a matchup that matters. It's Dalton Kincaid, who I think sort of by default now might be like what wide receiver one is for the Buffalo Bills. You mentioned no Gabe Davis, no Stephon Diggs. I think they'll lean on James Cook, like you were mentioning, no matter what. But Keon Coleman wasn't listed with the starters when the official depth chart came out, so people thinking that he was going to hit the ground running as a wide receiver one. I think he'll play plenty, but he just it wasn't that like, yeah, of course he's our top guy. It's Khalil Shakir, obviously like Dalton Kincaid is in there, Dawson Knox is in there as well, but I think Kincaid is going to be the guy that they're going to go to. There's a reason why they drafted him in the first round. And specifically in this matchup, the reason why I think he's a plus factor is because the Cardinals allowed the highest EPA per play last season when their linebackers were covering tight ends. So either they got to do something way different or Dalton Kincaid might eat on Sunday. So that is a plus factor for me looking at that matchup of how the Cardinals specifically tried to play their linebackers against tight ends. If they get caught in that again, I think that Kincaid could hurt him pretty bad. Titans, Bears. This one. Bears, very near and dear to your heart. I know
I'll be there. I'll be there on Sunday.
We'll be in the building. Carmen Vitali will be in the building. So she's going to give us a skinny when we get back on Thursday. She's going to tell us, are they going to the Super Bowl or are they getting the number one overall draft pick? There's absolutely no in between.
There's no in between.
There's
whatsoever.
Never any in between. A lot of changes for the Titans, obviously, with the new head coach and Brian Callahan. Bears, the story of the offseason, getting Caleb Williams, revamping that offense. They were on Hard Knocks, right? So there's a lot of hype there for the Bears. But what do we think about this matchup? What is of all of the matchups that I feel like we could choose in this one, what's the one that you like that you want to highlight the most?
Yeah, unlocking this offense and keeping Caleb Williams safe is, I think, the number one thing that the Bears need to do at this point. So that's the Bears offensive line versus Jeffrey Simmons, Harold Landry. Like, am I a little bit crazy for thinking I kind of like the Titans defense at this point? I don't know. I like it across the level, like across all three levels at this point, especially after they got L'Jarius Sneed.
Right.
I don't know. I'm looking at their defensive front and I'm like, I'm a little scared for Caleb Williams. And we have seen the offensive line in Chicago take a tremendous amount of strides over the last couple of seasons. I do not think they deserved half the ire they got last year. I think when your quarterback holds on to the ball more than any other quarterback, that just kind of makes it life difficult for an offensive line. This year, that shouldn't be the case, just given the fact that, yes, you do have Caleb Williams. And even if he takes a little bit longer processing, he does have so many outs with all of those offensive weapons. So that should kind of mitigate what the offensive line is asked to do. But I spent a couple of days with Tevin Jenkins, their left guard, this summer, training with him with AQ Shipley, who we know from Tampa. Tevin Jenkins worked out with him for weeks this summer, and I was privy to 2 days of their training. But the interesting things that Tevin Jenkins told me was, we talk about that center quarterback relationship, and the Bears will have a veteran center in front of Caleb Williams come Sunday. But the entire offensive line is taking responsibility for Caleb Williams' success and therefore the success of the entire offense. They're all making checks. If they're recognizing blitzes, they're going to call it out. It's not just the center's job. It's going to be the job of the entire offensive line. So I want to see what that looks like. And I want to see that really take hold under new offensive coordinator Shane Waldron as well. Plus, Shane Waldron really likes to use his tight ends in so many different ways. And they do act as extensions of the offensive line a lot of the time. And I think that's going to help this unit as well. They're going to need it against this Titans defense that I think a lot of people are overlooking.
I love the call out. I think that's great. I think the context obviously is great. Anytime that we get that kind of an insight, it's always an edge. So I'm glad that you highlighted that matchup. I'm actually going to stay in the trenches, but I'm going to flip to the other side. Sure. The phrase exists like, what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? Well, in this case, I'm wondering what happens when a stoppable force meets a movable object, because the Titans O-line was bad last year and the Bears D-line wasn't great last year. And we got the numbers for it in 2023. Now, look, I know that there have been some changes to both, specifically the Titans offensive line. They've got some new players in there, but they straight up have to play better, because last season, 245 pressures allowed. That was the second most in the NFL. 49 sacks allowed. That was the most in the NFL. Now, when you flip sides to the Bears, the Montez Sweat trade ended up being huge for them because he felt like he was carrying that defensive line once he arrived. Because even with his presence, though, when you take into the totality of what was the 2023 season, they were just 29th in pass rush win percentage as a group, 33.8, and they were 26th in total pressure. So these are two units that both of these teams knew they had to improve going into this offseason. Who improved more? And I think that is going to be a major factor in how these offenses and defenses operate here. The X factor for this, which isn't my plus factor, but it could have been, Bill Callahan, which is Brian, who is Brian Callahan's. Right. Brian Callahan's
trust anybody to improve an offensive line. His last name is Callahan.
Correct. Right. He comes over to the Titans staff to be on his son's coaching staff now. He's been coaching the Cleveland Browns offensive line over the last couple of years, one of the best offensive line coaches that we got in the NFL. Now he is working with that unit. So I think by default, you're thinking the floor is raised there. But what's Chicago's defensive line like? So I think that will really tell the tale. Can the Titans protect Will Levis the way that they need to? Can the Chicago Bears get the pressure up front to really allow that play-making secondary they have that I love? I love the secondary that the Bears have.
Yes.
They're going to be aggressive to the football, but only if the defensive line allows them to have those situations to be aggressive. So do you have a plus factor in this one?
I do. I realized it wasn't in the notes, but I was thinking about making my plus factor Austin Booker, given the fact that he's the one that's going to be opposite Montez Sweat. And that was the biggest addition that the Bears even made to the defensive line. They're really hoping that they can get more out of Javon Dexter and he can take that step forward at that three tech position. I think that's still a gamble, but we're going to see. My plus factor, though, is actually going to be Cole Kmet, because he's one of the longest tenured Bears, but I think this is the first time that we're going to see him utilized correctly in Shane Waldron's system. Shane Waldron runs multiple tight end sets at one of the highest rates in the league. And Cole Kmet presents such a good kind of way to exploit matchups with the defense, given the fact that at Notre Dame, he was a primarily blocking tight end. Over the last few years, he has blossomed into a receiving tight end. His hands have been great. And we've seen in preseason that Caleb Williams trusts him. There were a couple times, and I think one of the first big plays that everybody oohed and awed over with Caleb Williams was him rolling out on the run, torquing his body while neither of his feet are planted on the ground, and slinging it to Cole Kmet, who got a 26-yard gain off of it. So it seems like those guys already have a rapport. He's a big target. And I think that that's going to go a long way with the rookie quarterback. And we talk a ton about the receivers, and rightfully so, in DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and now Rome Odunze. But I think that Cole Kmet is going to be a huge factor along with that. And I think that happens against the Titans to start out with.
I love the shout out there. I also love the Austin Booker shout out because Booker, his draft process was all over the place. A lot of people really loved him around like December and January, but then, he kind of showed up to the Senior Bowl a little bit higher in weight than we thought he was going to be because he was just trying to get bigger. Wasn't playing as well. It wasn't as explosive. We saw that at a combine. It kind of freaked teams out. I think that's why you saw him slide as much as he did during the draft, but now he feels much more comfortable with that weight very clearly. We saw him in the preseason play pretty well. So I think that he isn't sort of a plus factor as well for that defensive line. I was saying that absolutely needs some more dynamic playmakers. I think the plus factor in this one is DeAndre Hopkins. And it's a little bit of an obvious, but he's coming back from a knee injury that forced him to miss most of training camp and most of the preseason there. So his presence, I think, is going to mean a lot because the Titans have Calvin Ridley, and I think Calvin Ridley is going to be fine for them. But I mentioned how much I respect this Chicago secondary with Jalen Johnson and Kyler Gordon, Kevin Byard, Jaquan Brisker. Tyreek Stevenson is there, and Stevenson didn't have a great year last year in his rookie season, but I think he's a candidate to bounce back. Now, just because I think he's going to have that he could have a bounce back season, that's different than having to guard DeAndre Hopkins if DeAndre Hopkins is playing really well. So I think that's going to be a matchup that's really important. And if the Titans want to kind of keep up with the Bears offense, I think that it's going to have to be through two wide receivers playing really well. So I think that Hopkins being back and being healthy enough to be a difference maker is going to be very, very important. Week 1 is here, and a new season means that it's time to have new ways to get in on the action with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. The fans have spoken. We want touchdowns. DraftKings has heard us, and they are delivering. DraftKings Sportsbook is the number one place to bet touchdowns this season. I mean, just the matchup that we just talked about right there. Titans versus Chicago. If you think that DeAndre Hopkins is going to be that X factor and he's going to break out, you say that he's going to score a touchdown. It's easy to do that. If you're ready to place your first bet, you could try betting on something simple like picking any player to score a touchdown. It's very, very easy. New DraftKings customers bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets instantly. Plus, you also get a month of NFL Plus premium on them. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use the promo code PFF. That's promo code PFF for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5, and you get that NFL Plus premium month on them as well. The offer will end September 19th, so get it now. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. If you got a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY, or you just text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problems with gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gambling resources, visit dkng.co/FTBALL. The NFL Plus premium offer is only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus premium terms at NFL.com/terms. Still on the 1 p.m. slate. Got a lot of games to get to this week. Patriots Bengals is the next one that we want to get to here on this marathon of a preview show. This one's fun. I think that what the Bengals are going to be out of the gate with a really easy schedule because they finished fourth in their division last year. Now you get a fully healthy Joe Burrow. The offense, everybody's coming back on offense. They didn't get rid of T. Higgins. The offensive line's going to be better. Defense should be solid. I think this could be an opportunity for the Bengals to come out swinging. But Carmen, what do you think about this one? What is the matchup that matters?
Well, hey, in the interest of kind of moving things along, I think you and I have the same matchup that matters, which is Christian Gonzalez versus Jamar Chase. ? Is he going to be covering T. Higgins too? Yeah, probably. How much is Jamar Chase really going to play, given that he hasn't been in practice?
You got to say it like Ron Burgundy because it's on the script. So you got to go Jamar Chase.
Jamar Chase.
Chase. That's how you.
I don't know. He has been at practice now. Yesterday, I believe, was his first day back, and he was going through individual drills. I don't know how many team drills he did. The good news is that him and Joe Burrow don't need practice at a rapport. They've been doing this together since college. So the thing is, I want to see how that kind of materializes between both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, I would argue that T. Higgins was as important to Joe Burrow. If you look at kind of their splits between quarterback and wide receiver duos, T. Higgins and Joe Burrow are in the top 10 in most major metrics.
Yeah.
And I think we're overstating. I mean, not that Jamar Chase isn't important because obviously he is, but we're understating how much T. Higgins means to this offense too, and the fact that they were able to retain him. Yeah. I'm very interested because I saw the Bears-Bengals joint practice and saw Jamar Chase in street clothes. He was in the pouring rain with his unit though, and still out there. So I think that means something. He's still bought into this team, and I think that he'll be able to hit the ground running. But it's going to be very interesting to see the kind of the splits and how both of those guys get work in the first game, given that Jamar has missed all training camp.
I think it was Kay Adams who asked Justin Jefferson. She's like, "Do you care about being the highest paid player in the NFL?" Because right, like the rumor is that Jamar's sort of holding out, obviously, for a new contract, but Jamar wants to be paid 1 penny more, or at least that's what people say. Then Justin Jefferson, who is his former teammate at LSU, who I'm sure obviously like they've got some friendly back and forth with whatever. And when Justin Jefferson was asked this question, he gets this like big smile because you could tell in his head he's like, how do I answer this correctly? Because if he says, yeah, absolutely, 100%, then I think in his head he could tell like, all right, but then
that means Jamar's not going to.
Right. Are the Bengals going to use that not to pay my boy? But if I say that I shouldn't be the highest paid NFL wide receiver, does that hurt like me in the future? And so it was very funny. These are two of the best in the NFL. And it's amazing that two of them came from the same offense at LSU. Wow, that was a record-breaking offense. Shocker. But I think that you're right. Christian Gonzalez versus Jamar Chase is the big one. Not only because Jamar Chase is coming off not practicing with the team, but also because Christian Gonzalez is kind of out for a big bounce back year. He's a lot of people's candidate to be a comeback player of the year after how well he played last year before he got hurt and missed most of the season. Last year in 2023, Christian Gonzalez, this just is a rookie, remember, rookie corner. It's tough to play corner as a rookie. 80.8 PFF grade on 209 snaps played, and in single coverage alone, 87.5 PFF grade on 34 snaps. So it wasn't a lot of snaps because he didn't play a lot, but still, that's a great start to an NFL career for a corner. It is so rare you get that kind of success. So I feel as though the Patriots are going to have the opportunity to be pretty fearless with this guy going up against either Ja'Marr Chase, maybe in shadow coverage, or saying, hey, it doesn't matter which one of them's on your side of the field, shut them down. Because like you said, you can't pay too much attention to one and not the other because it is a two-package kind of a thing, and Joe Burrow is going to distribute the football accordingly. But I agree with you. I think that really is the matchup that matters in a game that, let's face it, on paper, the Bengals outweigh the Patriots in a lot of ways. Maybe that's not how it's going to be
almost every way.
Season, but yeah. What about a plus factor? Who do you have outside of that big matchup there?
For that, then, I mean, in the interest of keeping Joe Burrow healthy, in the interest of making this kind of a well-rounded offense, you're going to need something from your backfield and Zach Moss because you no longer have Joe Mixon there. The Pats had a pretty good run defense last year, third best grade in the league, but they're better at defending outside zone than inside zone. And Cincinnati runs a lot more inside zone. So to varying degrees of success, but I think that they could have success then against a Patriots team that just doesn't defend it as well. And Zach Moss is going to be a huge part of that, both starting this game and then going forward, because you can't have a one-dimensional offense even when you have Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins. I think it'll go a long way in taking some of the pressure off of Joey B as they get further into their schedule and play some harder teams, because you're right, the fourth place schedule is just a cheat code for these guys right now.
It really is. You know, I predicted the Bengals to win like 13, 14 games this year. I think my official prediction was like 14 games. People were like, there's no way they'll win 14 games. It's like, look at the schedule. Even if you tell me that the division games are a toss-up, look at the rest of the schedule. Yeah, okay, they play the Chiefs, but if anybody's beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead, it's been the Bengals. Then they host Philadelphia. That's the only other tough team they play. Yeah. So every week it all starts 0-0. It's a tough league. I get it, but I think the Bengals are going to be pretty good. I wanted to be a hipster here with my plus factor, and I wanted to say Dax Hill, the Bengals corner, who's moving from safety to now full-time corner. But there's not really like a match. Like, I like Jalen Polk, I like Javon Baker, I like Pop Douglas, but there's not really like a matchup that I would highlight for this one. So I'll be a hipster a different week with Dax Hill. For my plus factor, I think it's got to be Trey Hendrickson, simply because he's been one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. We often talk about like guys at the very top, you know, the Max Crosbys, the TJ Watts, the Myles Garretts, the Micah Parsons, Nick Bosa, right? And it's often like a big four, a big five. Sometimes, even Max Crosby can get left out of those conversations. But over the last 3 years, 91.5 pass rush grade from Trey Hendrickson, 6th in the NFL. He's right there. I mean, he's right there with those dudes for how good he has been, how consistent he has been. So he's a major X factor because there's not really many other defensive linemen that are proven at all when it comes to getting after the passer consistently. So he's got to continue to be their stud on the defensive line, and he's a big part of Lou Anarumo's defense and sort of what makes it go. Yeah. The Texans and the Colts, we got a divisional matchup here to start the season. Big one here for both of these teams. Texans looking to take a division, and of course the Colts are looking to be a sleeper team to sort of take that division and take that next step here. This one's in Indianapolis. What's the matchup that matters here for you, Carmen?
It's Michael Pittman Jr. and Derek Stingley Jr.
Hell yeah.
It's the matchup of the juniors.
Hell yeah. Lines.
Again, I think that with the success of the Texans offense last year and CJ Stroud, that really overtook all of the narratives from what DeMeco Ryans has done with this defense, and more specifically what Derek Stingley has been able to do. He was such a highly touted prospect coming out of LSU, and I was actually at his pro day, blew everybody away. 17 passing touchdowns allowed, which is the fewest in the regular season. 39.1% on third, fourth down conversions allowed, ninth best. I mean, the 17 passing touchdowns was the unit as a whole, but Derek Stingley has such a huge part to do with that. He's an 86.2 coverage grade and led the team with 5 interceptions. So he forces incompletions on 23% of his targets. That's wild. And I really think that we're not talking enough about that. And I mean, Michael Pittman Jr. is going to be Anthony Richardson's guy when it comes to the pass game.
Sure.
And I want to see just what that matchup looks like. I think that there are some other components to the Colts offense that are going to be important too. But this singular matchup is what's going to sway this game for me, especially when you consider that, I mean, this is Derek Stingley Jr. has risen to the top of what has been a really good unit, and we're not talking enough about it.
Stingley Jr. was my number one overall player that I had on my big board for that. What was it, 2022 class?
2 drafts, yeah.
We needed this. We needed this one, and he has ascended, and I think that he has arrived, and I think that last year was very good from him. If you happen to catch some of the preseason clips from him, I mean, he was reading routes almost so fast that he was overextending on where, like, before the ball was even getting there, and he knew it was coming there, but it's like he almost read it too fast. That's how well this guy was seeing the game. So I'm excited to see him play this certainly this year, but this week with a major matchup against Michael Pittman Jr. I wanted to sort of contextualize a matchup with Anthony Richardson, because I do think this game obviously goes as he goes. We expect CJ Stroud to be able to hit the ground running with these new receivers. Obviously, that's a matchup that matters, but we think that they're going to be able to have success there. Where we have question marks is really on the other side with Richardson. And I like how Richardson played last year in the couple of games before he hurt his shoulder and was out for the season. I like Shane Steichen as an offensive mind. I think he simplified things really well for Richardson last year to get the most out of his strengths and really sort of mitigate his growing pains that he was going to have naturally throughout the NFL. And I think that this is sort of a matchup I'm looking for. Richardson last year, 56.5 passing grade just overall in the games that he played. So admittedly, not great. But when he was on the run, the passing grade went all the way up to a 69.5. So that's much more like serviceable. You can work with that. So the rollouts, the scrambles, getting Anthony Richardson on the move, and even like moving the pocket, I think allows him to just be more of a natural athlete. And do you want to develop Richardson to be more of a pocket passer? Sure you do. But going up against the Texans is damn difficult. So you almost just need to say like, hey, we got to try to get the best of you this week so we can stand a chance against a team that's the favorite to win our division, favorite to be a playoff team, and one that was an absolute house last year. So Richardson specifically versus D'Amico Ryan's, linebacker children, if you will, because he plays the position. He's got a lot of pride to it, right? Yeah, his sons.
They're his sons.
And so the linebackers and the contained players specifically for this team, can you keep Richardson in the pocket? Because I think Shane Steichen's going to want to get him out and moving. Are those linebackers able to trigger quickly enough to get downhill to allow him to not be able to read the field when he does get out on the run? The linebackers and how quickly they key on what Richardson is doing, especially when he is escaping, I think is going to be a key matchup in this game. What about a plus factor for you? Who you got?
Yeah. In a very complimentary sense, I have Jonathan Taylor, just given the fact that for all the things you talked about and how much I think that this offense is going to run those RPOs, you look at what Anthony Richardson was able to do in college off play action in particular, 1,271 yards, 11 touchdowns against just 2 interceptions, 91.9 PFF grade, passing grade.
Not bad.
Off of play action. And you need the threat of a run for that. I know that it's very simplistic to say like, oh, you need your running back to be part of that. But Jonathan Taylor, as dynamic of a running back as he is, can present so many different problems and kind of set up and open up this offense in a way that allows Anthony Richardson to utilize the full breadth of it, to run those RPOs, to even like when you're talking about those design rollouts and stuff like that, getting in space. I think a complementary piece to that is that Jonathan Taylor returns to form. So I think it's more a commentary on what the season needs to look like under Shane Steichen and what Anthony Richardson needs to do to be successful. But that starts against this Texans defense, like you said, is going to be able to contain or try to contain Anthony Richardson as much as possible. So get Jonathan Taylor out in space instead.
I think that that's a great one. I'll switch to the other offense. My plus factor is Tank Dell, kind of returning from that injury. And he played really, really well last season. 83.3 receiving grade. Nico Collins had, I think it was a 90, 91 receiving grade. So those two as a duo were really good last year. And now you're throwing in Stephon Diggs into the mix. And I think that Dell specifically is a plus factor in the, truest sense of the term, because there's some cornerback questions with the Indianapolis Colts. And you figure, okay, Juju Brents, if people think that he's going to have a good year, he's going to have to go up against Nico Collins or Stephon Diggs in this game. And then next corner up, is it Jalen Jones or who else is next? Like, they're going to have to handle whichever one Brents isn't on. And then you've got to have that third corner. I know it's probably going to be Kenny Moore, right? He's a stud slot corner. But if Dell can even have an even matchup with Kenny Moore, I think that the Colts secondary is in trouble. And so that to me is a plus factor in this one, is if you can get something out of Dell against one of the best nickel corners in the NFL, then all of a sudden I think that it is very clear advantage for the Houston Texans moving forward in this one. Jags Dolphins. We already got some Jags love in the chat here. Whew. People talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars. I feel like they're a very polarizing team. So this is
they're gonna like what I have to say then.
We're well, it's in the notes. We got the full screens for it, so gotta say it with confidence here. Jags are traveling to Miami, down to Miami, a Florida in-state matchup here. This one's another 1:00 game, so could be a hot one. Not that the Jags aren't used to it, but what's the matchup that matters here for these two Florida teams going head to head?
I mean, it's Tyreek Hill and I guess Ronald Darby. You lost Darius Williams. You lost Trey Herndon.
You got Tyson Campbell to guard sometimes,
When you consider that Tyreek Hill is Tyreek Hill and had 83 catches last year that resulted in a first down.
It's tough.
Only player with 1,700 receiving yards in 2 seasons.
Yeah.
26 missed tackles forced, which is first among wide receivers. I mean, this is a really tall order, and I'm very, very nervous for either of these guys to go up against Tyreek Hill, as I would be. This is just kind of a ubiquitous matchup to watch when anybody's playing the Dolphins. It's who the hell is covering Tyreek Hill? Yeah. And how are you covering Tyreek Hill? Because you need that safety help over top. You need someone to kind of put a lid on him as much as possible, as impossible as that is. So that's my
when you play Tyreek Hill and honestly Jalen Waddle in there as well, right? You could even expand this matchup to just be okay if you want to. I think Jags fans would say like, no, we got Tyson Campbell. It's like, all right, well, they also have Jalen Waddle. I think there's a lot of things that you have to think about here, and it will come down to Ronald Darby one way or another, like whether he's guarding Tyreek Hill, whether he's guarding Jalen Waddle. So I completely agree with you, especially because with that speed, you basically you have to play too high at the very least. Like you have to play the safeties over the top. I completely agree with you. The one way that I think you do slow down Miami is you get interior pressure on this team.
Yeah.
Because if there's one way to really rattle Tua, it's getting that interior pressure and forcing him off of his spot and forcing him to move and accelerating when he has to get rid of the football, not as on script as he would like to be. Not that he can't do that, but when you win up front in the middle as a defensive line, it is so impactful because the distance between you and the ball is the smallest.
It's the smallest, yes. So all the time.
The Jags defensive tackles versus Miami's interior offensive line, I think is a big one. Because if you look at Miami's interior offensive line last year's grades and then with this year's team, because Aaron Brewer is the new center on this team, which I think was a good signing from them, especially being able to move Eichenberg, who was not good at center. Brewer earned a 73.1 blocking grade last year with the Titans. Eichenberg, though, I mentioned with him being a center, 47.5, not good. And then Robert Jones is the other guard, 62.7, which is better, but not great.
Not great.
The Jags go out and they get Arik Armstead from the San Francisco 49ers. He's a big player in this, in my opinion, because if he can really give one of those three guys fits on a regular basis, that's actually how you slow down this Miami offense. It's not, all right, well, we're going to have one guy guard Tyreek Hill because then you're screwed. There's just no way it's going to happen. He's too good.
He can't prevent the ball from even getting there. That's
right. The way that you neutralize it is you got to be able to win up front. And I actually think the Jags have a player in Arik Armstead to be able to do it. So are there a couple of game-breaking plays that Arik Armstead's able to win and get home? I think that will be an important factor here. Armstead, 85.1 pass rush grade last year. So we know that he knows how to do it, and his big size and length is a mismatch against those interior offensive linemen anyways. But what about a plus factor here in this game? What do you got?
I'm going with another LSU wide receiver from going back a couple of topics now. It's got to be Brian Thomas Jr. because this is much needed in Jacksonville for Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence at present does not have a true number one receiver. I don't care what you say about Christian Kirk. You got Gabe Davis. That's great. He's a great number two. Both of those guys had 700 something yards last year. Gabe Davis was a little more productive when it comes to touchdowns. He had 7 touchdowns last year, as opposed to Christian Kirk, who only had 3. You're going to need Brian Thomas Jr. You're going to need BTJ to step up and be that number one wide receiver that you hoped Calvin Ridley was going to be, that wasn't. I think he could be huge for Trevor Lawrence. Again, LSU has just kind of become wide receiver U at this point. So I have a lot of faith in BTJ, and I talked to some of the guys over in Tampa after they had those joint practices against the Jags, and the coaches, all of them praised BTJ and what they saw from him. They were like, this guy is going to be really good. Yeah. And to see that in joint practices and in his rookie season, I think it just bodes very, very well. And again, you're going up against a Miami secondary, which I really like, but I like it kind of more from the safety spot too. Like Javon Holland is just one of my favorite players, but he's not going to be specifically assigned to Brian Thomas Jr., although we'll see what happens where they play him. It's going to be really interesting to me though, and I think that if the Jags are going to have a hope of beating the Dolphins, it's going to have a lot to do with BTJ.
Yeah, some people in the chat saying that the Miami Dolphins could have had Graham Barton. Those in Tampa, salute them for not doing that. But that could have been something that really could have helped. Again, I
was shocked that they didn't invest more in their offensive line, given how hurt they get.
The Chop Robinson pick feels like a Miami pick because he's a super athlete. And, with Jalen Phillips coming back from season-ending injury, and obviously Bradley Chubb suffering a season-ending injury as well, I sort of get it, but I felt like offensive line would have been more of the priority, even with them signing Brewer. So we'll see if that was enough, and we'll be able to sort of get a hint on that. But the Brian Thomas Jr. point, I did want to expand upon that because something that I looked up after the draft, because I like the Brian Thomas Jr. pick from the Jags. And as I went to sort of research and support me liking this pick, I found that I actually like it more than I even thought that I would have going into it. Because when you look at the Jags last year, they were top 10 in the league in big time throws, throwing attempts, completion percentage, and yards, I believe, when throwing 20 or more yards down the field. This is what they want to do. They want to be a vertical passing attack. And how Miami tries to neutralize that with a great veteran corner in Jalen Ramsey, but then another all-star secondary player in Javon Holland as their deep safety as well. That's going to be fascinating to me because that is what Jacksonville wants to do. And we might be in for a fireworks show between these two teams in week 1. This could be one of the highest scoring games of the entire week. My plus factor is Devin Lloyd, the linebacker from Jacksonville. And the reason why is because Miami ran the 4th amount of play action plays last season and had the 2nd highest passing grade when throwing off of play action last year, an elite 92.3. It's something that Mike McDaniel does often, and it's something that he does well. When you have the linebackers that can recognize sort of the hints of when it's going to be a play action and not have as many of those false steps or move one way or the other, that can really help. You can defend the middle of the field a lot better. You can occupy space. You can get into throwing lanes. And I think that Devin Lloyd is the caliber of player to do that. People are talking about a guy who is poised for a second-year standout season. I believe that could be the case for him. I liked him a lot out of Utah, especially his coverage ability. And I think that his play, and if we see sort of that uptick in anticipation from him this year, that'll be something that, again, allows Jacksonville to hopefully mitigate what Miami wants to do well. So I think that is a plus factor there that you got to watch out for. If Devin Lloyd's on his P's and Q's, it might mean a lot more to some of those no throws that don't show up in the stat sheet that you kind of got to watch the film to appreciate. So I'm going to look forward to going back to this one. Another divisional matchup here, an NFC South matchup. Carolina Panthers, New Orleans Saints. This one's in New Orleans. Carmen, we know this division very well. These are two teams that aren't at the top of the division, but the Saints are certainly looking to compete this year. We'll see if they can. What's the matchup that matters for you in this one?
Yeah, I'm going Jadeveon Clowney and Derek Carr and trying to disrupt what Derek Carr can do. He's fine against pressure. So he's 13th in adjusted completion rate among quarterbacks with at least 100 pass attempts. So he's 15th in passer rating, 15th in passing grade when facing pressure. So he's very middle of the road, the picture of average. And I think that that's a really good way to make him average and make sure that, he can't get the ball out to his receivers. And Jadeveon Clowney is going to be a big part of that as part of this Panthers defensive line now, which couldn't really muster a whole lot of pressure. Couldn't really muster a whole lot of anything. As the team was just abysmal last year. So this is the first step in seeing if the Panthers rather have really improved. And it's going to come, like you said, against a division opponent that you should know really well, even at the first game of the season. I think that's kind of the differentiating factor when you have a division opponent in week one. Usually you don't really know what you're going to get, but division matchups are just a little bit more familiar, and there's whatever carryover there is from the year before, you can kind of count on that when you have a division team, when you open with a division team.
Yeah, man, Clowney's going to be interesting.
I don't have faith in it. Let's be clear here. I don't know that I have faith in it, but we're going to see.
And it's tough because it's not that I don't necessarily have faith in Clowney, but Derek Brown is a stud in the middle, but I don't know how much Derek Brown alone is even a plus factor for Jadeveon Clowney, who it's not like Jadeveon's been a sack master his whole career. I think that's been a part of criticism against him being the number one overall pick, is people wonder why isn't he the sack master? And instead he's just a really great high floor run defender, and he can get after the quarterback as well, but not at the rate maybe people thought that he could. And in Carolina, it's very interesting. I've said this before here on this channel, so if I'm repeating myself to some who are listening, forgive me. But when I was looking up Jadeveon Clowney's sort of fit with Carolina, and what I really was looking up more of how he played well last year and how that could be replicated in Carolina, I found an interesting quote for him when he was in Baltimore last year. And people, and I think it was just an innocent beat reporter question. It's like, hey, how are you playing so well this season? What's different about you? And Jadeveon said, I don't really have a lot of pressure on me here. It's a really good defensive line. I feel I come to practice and I just I'm playing free. I just play free. It's not like I have a lot of stress on me, and I'm playing confident. I'm playing free. There's not a lot of pressure on me. That does not exist where he's at. No. It's the complete opposite. Whether you want to look at the money that he was given for his contract, the fact that he is the only one in the edge group who really has any sort of pedigree of getting after the passer at all whatsoever, the fact that it's a homecoming for him, right? He played college ball at South Carolina, which is just over an hour and a half down the road. He's from Rock Hill, South Carolina, which is 45 minutes down the road in Charlotte. This is the prodigal son coming home or whatever. This is all the pressure in the world, it feels like. And I hope he doesn't feel that, but it was just interesting that he sort of attributed that to his success in Baltimore, and that doesn't exist at all.
Yeah.
So we'll see, because you're right. I think that he's got to get after it, but specifically, he'll either be going up against a rookie in Talise Fuanga or somebody who has not been able to hold up his end of the bargain when it comes to being a first-round draft pick in Trevor Penning. So I guess it's a good matchup to start out with. I'll flip sides. I'll stay in the trenches. Big trench show here. I'll go Panthers offensive line versus Saints defensive line. The Panthers offensive line, much improved, and it took a lot of money to be much improved, right? They bring in Damian Lewis. They bring in Robert Hunt. Austin Corbett's now starting at center, back healthy. You're hoping that Ike Ekwonu is going to play better. Morgan Moses. Oh my goodness, who is it? Taylor Moton. Thank you. That felt like me saying thank you. That felt like the Quentin Williams moment when he sneezed and he's like, bless
you. He says bless you to himself. Yeah.
But anyways, so
you're just thanking your brain for getting there. I knew you were going to get there.
We unfortunately on this show, Carmen, it's going to happen a lot. You're literally going to hear me think about things, and I'll try to make it as a minimum as possible. But Carolina's offensive line should be better this year, if nothing else, but because of some moving pieces and some new guys that they have in. The Saints defensive line, I'm worried about. Last year, 22nd in pass rush grade, 22nd in pass rush win percentage, 23rd in total pressures. In theory, you could almost look at it as a positive for both sides. The Saints should be saying, we should have the advantage here. The Panthers should be saying, we should have the advantage here. Like, the Panthers probably believe that they are better than that. They're closer to middle of the pack or upper half of the league in offensive line. That's probably what they believe going into the season. They believe they should have the upper hand. The Saints, look at what the Panthers were last year, was not a good offensive line. They should be saying, we should have the upper hand. Which team actually gets it? That is a big time matchup that I think matters, obviously, because Carolina's offensive line is going to mean a lot towards Bryce playing well, having the time, being a little bit different this year. But who's your plus factor in this game?
Well, on that note, my plus factor is Ike Ekwonu. And
it's transition.
Look at the transition. Look at the synergy. The just wonderful synergy. I mean, Bryce Young was dead last in passing grade when facing pressure. And he faced pressure on 3.5% of his dropbacks, which was the second highest rate in the league last year. So fifth most turnover worthy plays when facing pressure, took the most sacks in the league, 69 sacks, which is decidedly not nice. And Ike Ekwonu himself had a 62.3 pass block grade. He allowed 12 sacks and 53 pressures. That is not what you wanted to see out of this guy that you had such high hopes for drafting him. And they are sticking with him, so they are giving him another chance. And I think that he will be better given the upgrades along the Panthers offensive line, and it won't all be up to him. I mean, it was just a complete disaster as of last year. This year, they will also have run game coordinator from Tampa, Harold Goodwin, and you will have Joe Gilbert as your offensive line coaches. They are great when it comes to pass blocking. The run game we're going to see. It was a little bit unimaginative in Tampa, and I'm a little bit concerned about what that could mean for Carolina and for Bryce Young, who could really use a backfield that he could lean on and a run game that he could lean on. I don't know if that's going to necessarily be the case, but in this game in particular, for all the reasons you just said about the Saints going against the Saints defensive line, you're going to need Icky to step up at that tackle spot. So we'll see.
I think that, it's why I've talked about Jonathan Brooks as sort of like a sleeper fantasy player for this team. Is like, whenever he comes back this season, they will need him. They will lean on him as the guy who was the best running back in college football last year, or at least I should say the best draft eligible running back in college football, because we had some good sophomores as well. But my plus factor, I'm going to stick with the Panthers offense. I think that it's Deontay Johnson. A little bit of a duh here. This one's a little bit more of an easy one to understand, but you go out and you trade for him for a reason, because last year it straight up was not good enough. You draft Xavier Legette when you did, because last year it straight up was not good enough. And they've got some guys who are still in the building from last year, but ultimately I think the top two guys in targets, all due respect to Adam Thielen, should be Legette and Deontay Johnson this year. So Deontay Johnson being able to come out and play well against a pretty good and aggressive secondary. I know it's tougher to do in New Orleans because that place gets lively. And me and you have been there covering Bucs games. I mean, when I keep wanting to call it the Superdome. Is it technically the Superdome? Just the sponsor is different?
It's the Caesars Dome.
The
right?
Caesars Dome.
Yeah. Caesars Sportsbook Dome.
I'm going to keep calling it the Superdome, actually.
I think everybody still calls it the Superdome.
All right. Whatever they're calling the dome that New Orleans plays in now, that place gets loud, especially for the first game of the season. They're going to be excited about it. And it's a tough place to play. It's going to be a tough place for the offense to play. But for the passing game, I think they're going to have to lean on Deontay Johnson a lot. So to me, he's going to have to be even more of a wide receiver one than he ever has been in the past. And last year, he had his highest receiving grade of his career in a single season. It was 79.1. So he's going in the right direction, obviously coming off a really good year, but they need an even better year for him this year for the Panthers to stand out and get better and ultimately answer the only question that matters for the Panthers this season. And that is Bryce Young the guy? And I think that that's an important part of this. So Vikings Giants, last game of the 1 p.m. slate here. How do we feel about this one? Where are we going? What's the matchup that matters for Vikings at Giants?
It's Minnesota's edge players versus Daniel Jones, I guess by default, the Giants offensive line, which should be better because the bar is extraordinarily low. Allow the third most pressures, third most sacks, most quarterback hurries. So Daniel Jones didn't really have, any time to work with or anything to work with for that matter.
Right.
And what you're going to see from Brian Flores and the Minnesota defense is he's going to blitz the hell out of you.
Right.
Yes. What's interesting though, is that last season, not all of those blitzes resulted in pressures. The Vikings were very middle of the road when it came to pressure rate in 2023. And I do think, though, that this year, more of those blitzes are going to get home because of the fact that you have two very viable pass rushers on either side of this defensive line, which is more than Brian Flores has ever had in his career. Prior to coming to Minnesota and having Danielle Hunter last year, he had never had a double-digit sack guy. Now you have two potential double-digit sack guys in Jonathan Grenard, who had 12.5 sacks last year for the Texans.
Yeah, great.
And you went out and got Dallas Turner with a first-round pick. So you have now two bookends to this defensive line that I think are going to end up getting home on all of these pressures, these blitzes, all of that kind of stuff. It's going to make life really hard for opposing quarterbacks. And I fully expect Minnesota and Brian Flores to still get creative with all of those simulated pressures and bringing different guys from different levels of the defense and all that kind of stuff, involving all those guys in the pass rush. But at the end of the day, you have two really good bookends. And that's going to be, to me, scary to go against. It'll, I don't know. You saw Kevin O'Connell's face when Kwesi told him that they were trading up to go get Dallas Turner. He was just like, what? We're going to do what? He was so excited, and for good reason.
It was, that was one of the best, like, behind the scenes moments that we had in the draft, for sure. Yeah. Dalton mentioned this again when we were going through the divisional preview show. He talked about how Flores' defense, just to sort of piggyback on what you were saying, Flores' defense are so unique. They're so mysterious. Like, you never know who's coming. You never know who's dropping, right? Like, and I think at the linebacker level specifically, those edge rushers, he wanted that flexibility to do both. And I was of the camp where I was like, man, I cannot believe they moved on from Danielle Hunter. Just one of the best top edge rushers in the NFL, most productive guys when he's been out there and healthy. He flips and goes to Houston. They bring in John Grenard. Then they draft Dallas Turner. And when Dalton was talking, it's like, okay, yeah, actually, now you have the ability with Turner and with Grenard and with Van Ginkel as well.
Yeah, I forgot to mention Van Ginkel. Like, such
drop these guys,
a versatile player.
Yeah, so it's the versatility of this defense, I think, was just taken to another level with the personnel that they have. And so I think that's a really good call out by you. I think also just understanding, look, I'm not trying to say that Daniel Jones is blameless. Like, he had plenty to get better with this year, but the offensive line stunk last year. There's no other way around it. And so, like, both parties have to play better. We'll see if they can get off on the right foot. I will switch to the other side, like we have done a couple of times on this show, and I'll talk about the trenches on the other side. The Vikings offensive tackles specifically versus the Giants edge rushers. Vikings offensive tackles, it's Christian Darrisaw and it's Brian O'Neill. These guys were the two highest graded pass blockers that we had on the Vikings last season. Darrisaw, 85.3 pass blocking grade. O'Neill, 73.4 pass blocking grade. So if you want two of them that could be your top pass blockers, they're in the right spots because you're going up against Brian Burns, who the Giants obviously paid a lot to go out and get, and then Kayvon Thibodeau. Now, here's the thing. In theory, sounds great. Burns has yet to really take that next step to be an elite pass rusher. He's at a pass rush grade, pass rush win percentage in double digits for most of his career, but it hasn't been like above that 15% like we really want to see from him. It's a tough test this week against these two offensive tackles, no matter which side he is on. And at the same time, if you look at Kayvon Thibodeau, double-digit sacks last year, but a pass rush win percentage of just 6.3%. He obviously like racked up sacks, but it was not consistent pressures. He was not winning one-on-one consistently. So did Kayvon take that next step this offseason? Is him on a defensive line with now Brian Burns and Sexy Dexy in the middle? Like, is this now a defensive line where he is getting all of these one-on-ones and he can actually win them? I thought when I was going to go back to watch his 11.5 sacks, that I was just going to see a bunch of cleanup sacks, a bunch of effort sacks. That's it. Half of them were cleanup and effort sacks, but the other half are good. The other half were like great hand usage, good bend, like what we saw at Oregon. So the flashes are still there for him. Let's see who wins this matchup. It's a tough one for the Giants edge rushers to come out of the gate, but I think if they show well against these two good pass protectors on the offensive tackle side of things for Minnesota, it could be a good year for this Giants defensive line. And again, on the flip side, if Darrisaw and O'Neill end up playing really well and shutting these guys down, well, you got a lot more faith in the passing game of what Sam Darnold could be here. What about a plus factor for this one?
I'm going to go kind of obvious here, and it's Malik Neighbors. because this is an LSU receiver show. I think it's turned into that apparently, which is fine. It's great.
It's sort of an LSU receiver league at this point.
So it's true.
We're just, good point. We just happen to be talking about it.
I mean, this is a guy, 43 catches, gaining 15 or more yards in the second in the FBS, fourth most missed tackles, forced on receptions, and 589 yards after the catch, which ranked 10th. He's a phenomenal player, and he was drafted accordingly. And he's going against a Minnesota secondary that isn't deep, that has taken its losses quite literally, unfortunately, in
I mean, I think that he could have a year like Odell Beckham Jr. had back when he won Offensive Rookie of the Year for this team in 2014. And that was like 12 touchdowns, like almost 1,400 yards. That was an incredible season. I'm sitting here going, yeah, I mean, Neighbors could, I guess. Now, he doesn't have Eli Manning throwing him the football. It's Daniel Jones, and it's an offense that's still really trying to figure things out. But I think over 1,000 seasons, maybe even 10 touchdowns is well within the realm of possibility for Neighbors because he was unstoppable last year. And I think that he's going to be the top passing weapon that we have here on this team. Before we get to the 4 p.m. slate, I'm telling you guys, we're previewing every single game, so we're going to get to it, I promise. I got to remind you guys that this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. In today's hectic world, it's easy to focus on everything except for yourself and your own mental health. Sometimes you need a little bit of help to make sure that stays on track, and that is well. Therapy can be a really great, useful tool to get a better understanding of how your mind actually works and become more aware of your own patterns and behaviors to improve them. It's useful for everybody, not just people struggling with something specific. I've been doing therapy for over a year and a half. It's something that I've really, really enjoyed. It's been something that's like sort of we said here, it has taught me things about myself that I never even knew. And it's allowed me to be more confident in my everyday life, in the relationships that I have, the friendships that I have, everything. It's been really great. And it started out as something that I needed help with, but now it's something that I look forward to going every other week because it's something that is very, full pun intended, therapeutic. And it really helps me out every single week and just throughout my life in a lot of different ways. If you are thinking of starting therapy, you should give BetterHelp a try. BetterHelp is convenient, flexible, and entirely online. It's a way for you to get therapy that is right for you. You just fill out a brief questionnaire to get you matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/PFF today to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/PFF. Here we go. 4 p.m. games. Raiders, Chargers. I feel like we always get some sort of Raiders-Chargers game in the 4 p.m. slot, so it's a good thing that we're starting out.
Another division matchup. I mean, if it's not like backloaded, they just want to come out the gate with them, apparently.
The NFL schedule's out for blood, with these divisional games here. Okay, so what is your matchup that matters here for Raiders at Chargers?
It's not really. It's a pretty obvious one. It's Max Crosby and Joe Alt in some cases. In most cases, we're going to see. He's a rookie. I mean, Joe Alt was my everybody's draft crush as far as offensive linemen went this season, this draft season. He's a massive dude, but what kind of sets him apart is that doesn't really affect his pad level. He can still get down. He is still just a phenomenal guy on the outside. I am really, though, concerned about his first test being against one of the best pass rushers in the league, who you talked about, who sometimes gets left out of these conversations, but not deservedly so. I mean, this is a guy that deserves to be right in the thick of things. Fourth among all players in pressures last year. He's third in quarterback hurries. He's just a game wrecker, and everybody is scared of him because he's also an absolute psycho on the field and will talk trash, and is just a really fun player to watch and everything you want an edge guy to be. Mm-hmm. But hey, I mean, Joe Alt's pass protection in college last year was great. Only allowed 1 sack, only allowed 2 quarterback hits. So we're going to see if that now translates immediately to the NFL level. And it's going to need more than the pass protection stats, though. You're going to need run blocking stats, right? Because Jim Harbaugh is going to run the damn ball. Yeah. If we have any indication of his previous stops in the NFL, and then that Michigan team last year that saw JJ McCarthy, I think, throw a total of 12 times in the fourth quarter all season, like an absolutely insane stat that I don't totally remember at this point, but I remember hearing it and just being completely shocked. This is just going to make or break Justin Herbert in this game, and that's a lot for a young rookie to take on. But we'll see.
Yeah, I think that it's a baptism by fire, as the phrase goes, and you just got to figure it out. And Joe Alt has been fantastic throughout his college career. Now you're going up against one of the best in the NFL. You're right. Max Crosby is. I feel like he's wired the way that you want your edge rusher wired. You know, like it's
a couple of screws loose.
You need these guys a little bit crazy. And look, I've had the opportunity to sit down with Max, and he's awesome. I'm just one of the most determined, competitive dudes that I've been able to interview. So it was a ton of fun to get to know him a little bit better for a feature piece that we did last year at PFF. So I know that he's going to give Joe Alt everything that he can handle, no doubt about it. I've got a matchup that I think is. It's close to the PFF style and PFF stats that people know and love here that I was able to find. Because when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about some X factors, and I was like, oh, outside of Davante Adams, who's this team really going to go to in the passing game? And I thought about how they prioritize Brock Bowers and how good Brock Bowers has been over the last 3 years of college football. So I said, okay, now Brock Bowers versus what about the Chargers defense? How have they normally matched up against tight ends? And I specifically wonder if they've got a better matchup than people are giving it credit for, because I think a lot of people look at Derwin James' name on the depth chart for the Chargers and they go, oh, Derwin's going to neutralize the crap out of Brock Bowers. He's got no chance. He might. Derwin's a very talented player. But last year, specifically in single coverage against tight ends, Derwin James had just a 57.4 coverage grade, the lowest of his career. Now, it was a career low grades across the board for Derwin James, and so a bounce back year for him probably looks different and better in every single area. But this one's very interesting to me because it is a rookie tight end who maybe you wouldn't think would produce right away, but sort of has to for the Raiders, going up against a player who did not fare well in this category last year, but has in years past. Which version of Derwin James are we getting? Which version of Brock Bowers are we getting? I think that that's a massive matchup here, because if Brock Bowers is neutralized, it's going to be tough sledding for the Raiders to really move the ball through the air, unless they're just getting Davante Adams 10 catches, 150 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So we will see with that matchup, but I think that that's a really important one with how Derwin James is going to bounce back from a down year last year. What about a plus factor? Who you got?
In the way that I just mentioned, how much Jim Harbaugh is going to run the ball, it's going to be Gus Edwards or J.K. Dobbins. And I picked actually J.K. Dobbins for something that we did on the NFL on Fox podcast as kind of a breakout player this year. I think he just obviously has struggled with health. But if he could stay healthy, I just feel like this offense in particular would allow him to thrive. And I'm hoping that that's the case for him, because you want to root for the guy who's just had so much potential and is so dynamic. And the Raiders' run defense ranked 21st in EPA per play allowed last year. So there might be kind of a lot of work to go around between how much Jim Harbaugh is going to run the ball and how much that should be effective against the Raiders.
This team, I've said it for a couple of weeks now, I think the Raiders are a sneaky team to be one of the better defenses in the NFL. I think there's a chance that this could even be a top 5 defense in the NFL for how well they were playing at the end of last season, especially when, oh my gosh, head coach Antonio Pierce. That was the last name. I wanted to say Gibson. I was like, it's not Gibson. That's the running back. Think of the other last name. When Antonio Pierce took over, the defense was just so rejuvenated. I think that you saw that, and I think that they got even better this year. That's why the plus factor for me is actually their cornerback, Jack Jones. Jack Jones, smaller corner, feisty corner. You love the competitiveness that he plays with. Had a really good year last year, really good preseason, specifically this preseason where I felt like he was all over receivers. And I think just his competitiveness, his fieriness, like that tone-setting way that he plays the game is going to be infectious for everybody on that Raiders defense. I think they take the identity of their head coach. And if you want to beat the Raiders, they might not score a lot of points this year, but I don't think you are either. So I think that they're going to be in a lot more low-scoring, one-score games than people are giving them credit for. And I think Jack Jones being an emerging corner this year is going to be a reason why. Moving on to Broncos, Seahawks here. What's the matchup that matters for you?
I think you and I are in agreement on this one as well, which is great in the interest of time because it's Pat Surtain and DK Metcalf.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I think that's it. Surtain obviously got the huge payday. What I thought was really interesting too, given the fact that Jair Alexander was the previously highest paid cornerback at $21 million a year by average contract value. Mm-hmm. You went up to $24 million for Pat Surtain. Like, he is besting Jair Alexander by $3 million a year, and it's very rare to see people resetting the market? No, but people resetting the market to that degree where you're that far away. And I mean, I have no doubt that in the next couple of years, that's still going to become a bargain, because as the receiver bubble kind of goes up and inflates, so does the quarterback as a reactive thing, which makes a lot of sense. But it was just interesting to see the vote of confidence, especially given the fact that the Broncos this year they have a $53 million dead cap hit given Russell Wilson, but the extension, I believe, kicks in next year. And you're signing up to still pay top of the market money to probably, though, your best player on defense. Not probably, your best player on defense.
Yes.
And I mean, in single coverage last year, 206 snaps, 56 targets, 30 catches allowed for 446 yards, 2 touchdowns. 9 forced incompletions. That's the biggest thing. And in this matchup in particular, it's going to be one for the ages, given the juice that Pat Surtain is going to be playing with, and the way that DK Metcalf is going to say nope.
I think that this is a big one. Obviously, you mentioned sort of a lot of the things that I would mention as well. I think that on the flip side, you've got an interesting matchup between Courtland Sutton, who I think sort of has to be the wide receiver one for Denver, and Devon Witherspoon, who I think is going to be I love Devon Witherspoon. He's going to be one of the best corners in football this year, and I think that he's going to prove it. So we have 2 major wide receiver corner matchups that I think are going to mean a lot to this team. Now, Seattle's wide receiver room is deeper than Denver's is after their top guy, but I think that those are 2 huge matchups to me in, can these offenses really unlock things the way that they want to? I think that Seattle's defensive line, they add Leonard Williams, they add Byron Murphy II. The defensive line, they really could not get after the passer. It was not as good of a unit as it needed to be last year. Mike McDonald's moving over from being the Ravens defensive coordinator to their head coach now. He did an excellent job with the Ravens front last year, staying multiple, but also staying strong. A lot of weight on there, basically on all 4 positions. They have the guys to be able to run that defense already this year. So I'm sort of excited to see that versus what I think is still the most expensive offensive line in the NFL in Denver, I think. And so that matchup is going to be a really key one as well. But the skill positions to me, Metcalf versus Surtain, Witherspoon versus Sutton, who kind of comes out on top with those is going to go a long way into who wins this matchup. But what about a plus factor? Who's your plus factor here?
Well, kind of going off of that too, sticking with skill players, it's Tyler Lockett then. Because, all right, say this happens with Pat Surtain and DK Metcalf and they lock each other up and that's whatever, then you've got Tyler Lockett, oh, by the way, for Seattle, who had 11 explosive plays from a wide alignment last year, 3 touchdowns. And also the Broncos have a white cornerback that is really going to go against Tyler Lockett.
Riley Moss.
And Riley Moss, who didn't
respect it.
I respect it, but he also didn't start a game last year. So he was part of the rotation and used as a rotational player. So I don't know, man. I don't know. It's a white cornerback going against Tyler Lockett. That's basically my analysis. It's a white corner going against Tyler Lockett.
Who is who is it? Rashad Mendenhall who tweeted about it? Who was it?
Yeah, I think it was
Riley Moss. Look, Riley Moss, Cooper DeJean. Times are changing now.
Times are changing. Yeah, we're coming back around, man.
Jason Sehorn, he's coming back too. No, look, I think that obviously Tyler Lockett as an X factor makes a lot of sense, because if you're so focused on that one matchup, those guys are so talented. Pat Surtain and DK Metcalf, they're locking each other up. You're going to have the ability to go to him, and Jack Smith-Njigba too. I think is an important one there. Kenneth Walker is the plus factor here for me for Seattle, because there wasn't a ton of change in the Broncos front 7 last year, and the Broncos were 25th in the NFL in run defense grade as a team, 59.7. And so it was just not something that they did very well last year. Walker wasn't as explosive as he was his rookie season. His rookie season, he had 5 100-yard games, but that's still obviously something that he is capable of. And he really could be a player where we're sitting here talking about the passing matchups left and right. But if the Broncos can't stop Kenneth Walker, they're going to just keep giving him the ball. They're just going to keep allowing him to churn out yards for them. And I think that he could be a major plus factor for this team. So that's another one that I'm really looking forward to there. Bo Nix, I think, is we didn't talk about Bo Nix yet, but certainly how he comes out of the gate. He played well in the preseason, but it's different. It's different when you play well in the preseason. Now you're going into Seattle, one of the toughest places to play in the NFL.
Loud. Very loud.
Against a Mike McDonald defense. I mean, he's going to have Bo Nix as confused as possible. So we'll see how he ends up playing, because, man, if Nix can still look calm and collected in that situation, in that environment, game one, then it's obviously very encouraging for him moving forward. Cowboys Browns 425 game, now getting into the 425 slate. These are both teams who is an AFC versus NFC matchup, so not a ton of familiarity between these teams and how often that they see each other, but both with playoff aspirations this season. Matchup that matters. Let's hear it. Who you got?
I'm going specific players. I think you and I are pretty much on the same page with this, but I'm going specifically rookie left tackle Tyler Guyton against Myles Garrett.
Always tough. Telling a rookie to go out there and block Myles Garrett, it's almost just like, hey, buddy, good luck.
I mean, Tyler Guyton has looked great in preseason and in practice. You also have another rookie along in the offensive line in Dallas, and Cooper Beebe at center. Again, you have a veteran quarterback, so I think that's a situation where you can get away with this, and Cooper Beebe has risen to the occasion as well. But Tyler Guyton in particular, I mean, this is the toughest test you could possibly get in your first freaking game. So this is a team that is known for its offensive line play, but Myles Garrett also knows how to get to them. As you can see, at 27.5% pass rush win rate.
Stupid.
Ranked first against this unit. 28% pass rush win rate on third, fourth down, which is also ranked third. So
which is nuts. It gets better on passing downs.
It's
the pass rush win.
It's stupid, is what it is. And I mean, I'm nervous. I'm nervous as any left tackle going against Myles Garrett, who I think is one of the best players in the league.
And I have faith in Tyler Guyton because, my matchup is the offensive tackles in general. Like, I have faith in Tyler Guyton that he's going to be a good pro. I really do. This may not show that. This admittedly sucks. This is really tough to go up against, but it's not just him. It's on the other side too. Like Terrence Steele might not be a new offensive tackle, but he was rough last year. 49.5 pass blocking grade in 2023. So if you want to put Myles Garrett on either side, and he's not just Myles Garrett either, like Zadarius Smith, they brought back, and I thought that was a great job by them to bring him back, because you don't want it to all be about Myles Garrett, even though he can handle it. When you have two pass rushers who could really get after it, that's when you really start to be dangerous. And I think that the Browns obviously are. They've got to win that matchup up front. I'm really looking forward to seeing the Browns corners, Denzel Ward, Martin Emerson, not Grant Delpit, Greg Newsome, who is going to play a lot of slot for them, like how those corners go up against the Cowboys receiving options, particularly CeeDee Lamb, right? Because I think that is one of the best cornerback trios in the league. And I think that they are one of the few teams where they can kind of go, all right, put CeeDee Lamb wherever you want. Like, we're good. And there's just not a lot of teams. Now, that's not to say like CeeDee Lamb won't get his own, but this is one of the few teams in the NFL that has the ability and the confidence in all three of their guys to say, we're not going to even call one of these matchups a quote unquote mismatch. Like it's going to be a battle for CeeDee Lamb, no matter what, no matter who he's matched up against. And you're just not going to find a lot of teams where that is ever the case, especially when a player as talented as him.
And the fact that, given the fact that CeeDee Lamb is 30% of the Cowboys offense, you can afford to double team CeeDee Lamb.
Right.
So you can take him completely out of the game with two of your corners, and you're probably still going to be fine.
Yep. I agree. No, that's it's an important part of the plus factor. Who's your plus factor in this game?
You talked about being a hipster in the Cincinnati game, I believe.
Yes.
I'm going to be a hipster for this one.
Who we got?
And I'm going Cowboys rookie corner, Kalen Carson.
Oh, let's go.
Yes. Because he's going to see a lot of Amari Cooper or Elijah Moore, and he's a 5th-round rookie out of Wake Forest. So he's going to need to play well, and the expectation is that he's going to play well because the Cowboys fans saw what Deron Bland was able to do in his rookie season, and now I think that every rookie corner, no matter where they're taken in the draft, is going to be able to ascend right away and make an impact right away. I don't know. Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore are pretty tough tests for a guy that was taken on day 3 of the NFL draft this year. So that's going to sway a lot, I think, for the Dallas Cowboys, and if their secondary can hold up.
It's tough losing Deron Bland because this is a team that is not only losing him, but losing Dan Quinn, right? And I think when you look at over the last 2 years, Bland had 9 interceptions last year. Trayvon Diggs had 11 the year before. Yeah. I mean, it's a unit that's been really aggressive under Dan Quinn, that has had a lot of interceptions. And when you take those away, like how good really is the passing defense? And, Diggs is coming back, but is he going to be a feast or famine player like he has been in the past? Is going to be a little bit more consistent. Kalen Carson's going to be a big time X factor. I agree with you. Plus factor. Sorry, I got to be right with my own branding here. Because I was a big fan of his, and I think he plays the game very confidently. He didn't have a great year last year in his final year when he was at Wake Forest, but the year before he played really well. You play him in off coverage. You allow him to look at the quarterback. You allow him to manipulate him with the space that he has. He can get aggressive. He can undercut the ball. He can be that type of interception type of player, that high risk player that Dallas's defense has fed off of, and that has rewarded them over the last couple of years. My plus factor, maybe a player that's going to be going up against Kalen Carson quite a bit is Jerry Jeudy, right? I mean, I think that Jeudy is a big part of this Cleveland Browns wide receiver room, and he needs to be. There's a reason why you go out and trade for him. It's because you need somebody other than Amari Cooper. Elijah Moore didn't exactly step into that role and take that by the reins. So you go out and you go get Jeudy. Can Jeudy have the best year of his NFL career? Because to this point, in 2022, he had a receiving grade of 77.9. But before then, 68.1 last year, 70.5 in 2021, 64.8 in 2020 as a rookie. Like, he just has not played as successful in the league as people thought that he would have when they watched him at Alabama, even as a true freshman at Alabama. So we're still looking to unlock that ceiling of what could be Jerry Jeudy. I think he'll be a plus factor in this game because he's got a pretty juicy matchup against a rookie corner who will probably see a lot going up against him in the slot. Commanders traveling to the vaunted Raymond James Stadium to take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Pew, 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 pew. Game. Those are the cannons.
What did you say?
I said pew pew. Those are the cannons.
Oh, those are the cannons. Nice, good. We had to get them in there. That's we'll have the official 3D effects later in the show, but we just couldn't. We didn't have it in the budget for this.
Didn't have the budget to actually.
Yeah, we'll get there, folks. We'll have an actual live cannon for week.
Yeah. Let's just do that.
So Commanders at Buccaneers, Jaden Daniels coming into town. He really is the talk of this game, but is he your X factor here? Is he your matchup to watch for, or what do we need to watch out for here with Washington coming to Tampa?
How could I go anywhere else but my trenches? Because of but actually I'm going the other side. Usually I go offensive line when it comes to my teams, but it's going to be the Bucs interior defensive line against the Washington interior offensive line. For much what we were talking about earlier about how the quickest way to the quarterback is through the A gap. You need to be able to hold up there, and Washington was very average last year as far as offensive line, and they've made some improvements and adjustments and all that stuff, which is great. But Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey are not average. And Washington brought in Tyler Biadasz from division rival Dallas, which should tell you something that Dallas was okay with giving up Tyler Biadasz. He was a free agent, but didn't want to re-sign him, all that other stuff. He had a 63.4 pass block grade, which ranked 22 among centers, not like offensive linemen, centers. So it's not great. He allowed a 4.4% pressure rate last year, which ranks 28th among centers with at least 25 snaps, 25th in pass blocking efficiency. So this isn't as much of an upgrade. I think that it was a name, but I don't know that it was an upgrade as much as, they wanted it to be at least. And going against Vita and Kalijah is no easy thing. They're space eaters, but more than space eaters. Like, they don't have the gaudy stats and stuff like that, although Vita did have 6 sacks last year. But I anticipate that happening even more this year and getting pushed from that interior, as we know Todd Bowles can do.
Yeah, when you look at Washington's offensive line, that was a big area that they wanted to hit. Sam Cosmi was great for them last year as their
they rewarded him.
Offensive lineman, right? And he got the extension for it. But I think that's a really good point on Biadasz, just because you make a change. Is it going to be positive? We'll see. I think that Nick Allegretti as well, backup offensive line for the Chiefs. Who knows? And if you got Brandon Coleman starting at left tackle, are you going to have to help the rookie instead of really helping out on the interior versus Kancey and Vita? I think that there's a lot of things to think about there. So I definitely think that is a matchup that matters. I'm going to go out to the skill positions for this one. people talk about like, oh, who do the Commanders have outside of Terry McLaurin? And it's a great question, and we'll sort of get the beginning of the answers to that this week. But even just Terry McLaurin in this one is a big deal because the Bucs are sort of elevating guys from CB2 status to CB1 and from CB3 or CB4 to now CB2. And that is Jamel Dean and Zion McCollum now as the two starting out cornerbacks for this team. One of them is going to be matched up with Terry McLaurin most of the time. And look, a lot of people like Jamel Dean, and he's had steady success throughout his years. In the first 5 years of his career, he has had a coverage grade between 70 and 80 every single year. So his floor has been very high as a player. In the games in which Carlton Davis has been inactive, where Dean has then been the de facto CB1, it's a little bit less, but not really very much, 69.5 in those games where Carlton Davis has missed over those last 5 years. So assuming those CB1 duties, you think it wouldn't be too much for Dean, but it is, I think, a little bit different when that is all on your plate. And McCollum, on the other side of things, I know Todd Bowles and this defensive staff have a lot of faith in him, but day 3 pick, 47.3 coverage grade last season, it has to be a leap for him to be that starting caliber cornerback. And the thing is, Jaden's going to be confident, I think. I feel like I saw that when we watched him in the preseason. I was so impressed with how confident I felt like I was watching him be, especially in that Miami game. It was like, damn, does he think he's back at LSU? Because he threw at LSU like there was nothing to lose. Like he knew
there wasn't.
Like he had to. These guys were going to win one-on-one every single time, and he was just putting the ball exactly where it needed to go. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Daniels, but he was operating with a lot more confidence than I think that rookies normally do when we saw him in the preseason. Does he still have that right out of the gate in Tampa? And if he does, I'm telling you, he's going to be going after Terry McLaurin a lot. It's going to put a lot of pressure on those two corners. Can they hold up against one of the better receivers in the NFL? I think that's a huge matchup because if you shut down McLaurin, then all of a sudden, I don't really know where else you go to. It's a lot of unknown after that. So that could mean a lot for them. Plus factor. Who's your plus factor in this?
It's Antoine Winfield Jr., but probably not for the reason that you think. You talk about how there's going to be a lot of pressure on the Bucs corners.
I'm in.
I know.
I'm in.
I know.
I'm on the edge of my seat now.
It's because of the fact that he is so incredibly versatile, and Todd Bowles is also so incredibly creative when you talk about simulated pressures and getting blitzing from all different levels. Antoine Winfield Jr. loves to go after the quarterback. And that is going to be something that I think that Jaden Daniels is not going to be used to. He's going to see some things from Todd Bowles' defense that he's never seen before, because every quarterback going against Todd Bowles' defense pretty much is going to see things that they've never seen before. Todd is not afraid to take risks when it comes to blitz packages and all that kind of stuff. So Tweez, as he's so affectionately called, I mean, he's tied for the best pass rushing grade among all DBs with Kyle Hamilton. I think Kyle Hamilton has this reputation for being this downhill physical player, and we all love him so much. Antoine's numbers are better than Kyle Hamilton, or at least as good. And if I saw a stat the other day, I think this is on Twitter, and I apologize because I don't know exactly where it came from, but if Antoine Winfield Jr. has 5 sacks this year, keep in mind he had 6 this past season. So if he has 5 this year, he will only need 11 more the rest of his career to set the DB sack record in for all time. Like, it's just an insane thing for a safety to be this effective in the pass rush. What
is he like, 25?
Yes.
26?
Yes, he's 26 maybe. I think it's a combination of the fact that he's one of those old school players alongside Jordan Whitehead now again. And it's this incredibly physical DB room and safety room in Tampa, on top of the fact that their head coach is a former safety that knows how to get creative and isn't afraid to use safeties in his pressure packages. So I am just thrilled for Antoine because I think he's starting to get the flowers. But I mean, again, you're talking about a guy with pass rush run weight of 21.8%. That's the best among DBs. He knows how to get to the quarterback. And so I think that's going to be different for Jaden Daniels. And I would not want to be Jaden Daniels going up against what Todd Bowles is now cooking up and has had weeks to cook up for a rookie quarterback.
It's going to be a fun matchup. There's no doubt about it. My plus factor in this one, I'll go to Tampa side of things. I'm going to say running back Rachaad White. And White, I think, had a really good year last year, getting the lion's share of basically everything from the running back room, whether it was receptions, whether it was handoffs out of the backfield. And there wasn't a lot of success, when running the ball last year when it came to just efficiency. Some of the overall numbers, like the raw total numbers, could have looked good, but efficiency numbers, not great. When you look at White, 0.14 missed tackles forced per attempt. That's one of the lower marks. You want something at least in like the mid-high 20s. And yards after contact, below 3. You want something above 3. He was 2.5. Now, the interior offensive line, we talked about it earlier on the show, not what it needed to be for Tampa Bay. So that is going to be better anyways. But my question is, and the reason why I think that White is a plus factor here is, with the offensive line playing better in Tampa, does then Rachaad White play better? Like, does his game elevate as the offensive line's game elevates? And that will sort of be the tale of like how much you can continue to lean on him. And I think that this is going to be a really important season for him. And with a better offensive line, I think that it could potentially be his best year yet, but we'll see. I mean, like you drafted a guy like Bucky Irving as well, who you're probably not afraid to go to at some point if he can give you some more efficient numbers, but maybe it's also a backfield that's a lot more by rotation than it was the year before. So we'll see. And I think that Rachaad White's efficiency stats, can he make some guys miss in space? Can he get better yards after contact? That's a big plus factor for keeping this offense as balanced as they want to be under new offensive coordinator Liam Cohen. The Sunday night football game is Rams-Lions. We got Matthew Stafford's return to Detroit to take on the Lions. These are teams with obviously playoff aspirations. The Lions, certainly Super Bowl aspirations. We'll see about the Rams. What's the matchup that matters here for these teams in primetime?
It's Carlton Davis and or Terrion Arnold against Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. It's as simple as that. If there was one blemish on this Lions team last year, it was their secondary and the fact that none of these guys could stay healthy. This offseason, Brad Holmes, general manager in Detroit, was like, I am fielding a full secondary come hell or high water. And they traded for Carlton Davis with Tampa. And I loved that pickup. And then proceeded to get not one, but two cornerbacks in with their first 2 picks in the draft this year, in Terrion Arnold out of Alabama and Ennis Rakestraw out of Missouri. Talking to some coaches over there too, they didn't have the intention of doing that, but it was, hey, Ennis Rakestraw, they had their equivalent of a first-round grade on him. That's not exactly how they grade those guys over there, but they had the equivalent of a first-round grade on Ennis Rakestraw. So when he was still there on day 2, they were like, all right, we're taking him. And now you have an incredibly deep unit in that Lions secondary to complement the pass rush up front, which I'll get to in a little bit, if that's not some foreshadowing. And you're going up against a Rams team that Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua are one of the best wide receiver tandems in the league. But Nacua in particular is just, I mean, I think he was obviously underestimated last year. I don't think that will be the case this year after he had 308 receiving yards after contact, which was the first, ranked first in the league. Cooper Kupp, it's going to be interesting to see who ends up kind of covering him in the slot, which is why, because when moving into the slot, he had 455 yards, which is 13th in the league as well. So they can move him around.
Right.
And so it's going to be interesting to see if the Lions themselves, if they bring Brian Branch to kind of cover the slot, which they've done before, or who they get to do that. But now they have a lot of options, which I think is going to be tested in this wild card rematch.
A lot of tough tests early on in week 1. Like, we're going to get a lot of answers to some serious questions. And this is one of them, right? I mean, people talk about the Lions as a Super Bowl caliber team. I have them winning the Super Bowl this year. But when you talk about what could hold them back, it is that secondary. It is that coverage grade that they had last season. They attacked that this offseason to get a lot better. But like you said, they've got to show up and be different now. Really tough test with a quarterback like Matthew Stafford and receivers like Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. I'm going to go into the trenches for this one because, when we think about Sean McVay, the first thing that everybody thinks about is the passing game, right? It is Stafford and Nacua and Cooper Kupp and just what he has been able to do, taking the league by storm with the condensed sets and all that kinds of stuff. And so in McVay, we think about the passing game so much with him, but this team was 6th in the NFL in EPA per rush last year. They want to run the football. And for McVay, I think when he started as a coach, he was very much like a Shanahan disciple. It was a lot of mid-zone, outside zone. He wanted to have zone runs, but last year they ran more man gap scheme concepts between the tackles, power concepts, than they did zone. And so they were sort of like zigging when the world thought that they were going to zag, or that whatever they were used to.
Isn't that what makes McVay one of the brightest offensive minds?
And it does. And I think that this matchup in particular is very interesting because you got Kyren Williams coming back. You drafted a guy like Blake Corum, who's great between the tackles already. So I think that they've got the ball carriers to be able to do it. But the interior offensive line for the Rams, they bring back Kevin Dotson, who was their top run blocking player last year, 88.8 run blocking grade, which you love. Steve Avila, 58.8 run blocking grade last year. They signed Jonah Jackson from the Lions, 58.2 run blocking grade last year. So a lot less efficient than Dotson was, but those are the three starters along the interior offensive line for the Rams. On the flip side, the Lions' top run defender last year was defensive tackle Aleem McNeil, 73.3 run defense grade. He now gets to play next to DJ Reader, who has been a really good run defender for the Cincinnati Bengals, now coming over to the Lions, 75.3 run defense grade. So it is going to be those strong titans in the middle. The Lions want to stop you up front with their defensive tackles, and the Rams want to run power up front with those three interior offensive linemen. Who wins that battle? Who gets better push all game long? That will be able to, I think, be a major factor in who ends up executing their offense or defense the way that they need to in this game. And I think the Lions are going to put on a show when it comes to lighting up the scoreboard. The Rams are going to have to be able to match, and I only think that they can match if they can stay as efficient as they were last year in the run game. So those two guys in the middle for Detroit are going to be a big factor as to whether or not they can keep pace with a potent Lions offense. Plus factor in this one. Who you got?
Real quick, I'm really glad that you brought up Aleem McNeil, just because he does not get the shine that he deserves. It's been kind of my little pet project to talk about how good Aleem McNeil is, not only in run stopping, but just eating up space. There's a lot of beef in there between DJ Reader and Aleem McNeil, and I got really, really excited when the Lions ended up signing DJ Reader, because I thought that was just going to give a lot of shine to that defensive line. But again, in a complimentary fashion, my plus factor, company girl, Aiden Hutchinson. And I think you and I agree on this for so many different reasons. But the biggest thing for me in this matchup in particular is that if you can get pressure on Matthew Stafford, his completion rate goes down to just 43.3%. And that is the key to getting to him. He's not terribly mobile. He's one of, he's probably one of the best, if not the best pure passers in the league, but he can't do a lot outside of that. You only get a short amount of time to even get to him because he gets the ball out in pressure situations, the fastest of any quarterback. He is the 8th fastest release, period. But hey, Hutch, his get off, the way that he can affect the quarterback instantaneously, led all edge rushers in quarterback hits last season with 25. One of the big factors here too that we're not talking about, or haven't seen a lot of people talk about, is the fact that Detroit now has a new defensive line coach in Terrell Williams. And that kind of was very quietly, they ushered in a new head of that unit. And Terrell and Aiden Hutchinson have really taken to each other. The first thing Terrell Williams did when he got to Detroit was take Aiden Hutchinson out to dinner. And Aiden Hutchinson said, it came out on M Live, which is a Detroit publication, this, I believe today, Aiden Hutchinson was like, that's the first time I've really ever had a one-on-one dinner with my coach. And he just responded to that in a way that was really great. And I think that that's going to pay dividends for him, not only on the field, but off the field as well, and which will kind of all work together with the culture that the Lions have built. And again, when you have those guys taking up space on the interior, that's going to provide some favorable matchups for Aiden Hutchinson on the outside.
101 total pressures last year, second amongst all players, second behind Michael Parsons. I mean, but you echoed it. I mean, he's the X factor. He's the plus factor in this game beyond some of the matchups that we just mentioned there. Last game that we have, Monday Night Football. Whew. New York Jets, San Francisco 49ers. I just need Aaron Rodgers to make it through the game, please, because I would genuinely like to watch the Jets this year have Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. So we're going to manifest that. No injuries, nothing like that's happening. We're just getting a really good Jets team versus a really good Niners team. Carmen, who you got is the matchup that matters in this one?
This is a little tongue in cheek, but it is Leonard Floyd against Aaron Rodgers' Achilles in particular.
The Achilles is going to be good. Manifest. Come on.
Well, if you recall, Leonard Floyd was the one that tackled Rodgers when he ruptured his Achilles last year. Leonard Floyd then with the Buffalo Bills. Oh. He's now with the Niners. That is why it is a very specific matchup.
That is a deep cut.
It's a deep cut, and it's going to obviously make a difference. Now, part of that is obviously, can the offensive line hold up for Aaron Rodgers? So by de facto, we'll get to my plus factor later, but this is going to be we've gotten the worst of Aaron Rodgers because we've just gotten the talking Aaron Rodgers. We haven't gotten the playing Aaron Rodgers. And the fun part about Aaron Rodgers is his play on the field, because there is virtually no one else that is more fun to watch play the quarterback position than Aaron Rodgers, save for maybe Patrick Mahomes. But growing up watching Aaron Rodgers, I want to see that Aaron Rodgers back. He is only 2 seasons removed from an MVP season, but his last year with the Packers, which is the last time he played a full season, he was hurt with the thumb injury, looked very mid. Last year, we all know what happened. So I know the league wants him to justify putting the Jets in prime time again, because we all got stuck watching the Jets last year in prime time entirely too many times. And hopefully this year it'll work out. So Leonard Floyd, just keep Leonard Floyd away from Aaron Rodgers' Achilles.
I mean, that is a good matchup. I mean, I have the Jets offensive line versus the Niners defensive line. So, I mean, that is sort of the same thing. You went a little niche. Deeper with that one, a little more niche with it. But when you look at the 49ers, obviously the Jets offensive line was an issue last year. Now they go out and they get Tyron Smith. They've got Morgan Moses now as well. I think the interior should be good. You got Elijah Vera Tucker back. Joe Tippmann's out there. Like, I think that it is a good unit. It really is. It's much better on paper than it was last year. But this is a tough test early on. There's no doubt about it. 49ers in 2023, 88.8 pass rush grade as a team. Now, they don't have a Reek Armstead, but still, I think it's a really good unit. Third in the NFL, 409 pressures. That was second in the NFL. 56.6 pass rush win percentage as a team, fourth in the NFL. It's just, that's all it comes down to, truly. Yeah. I think that Rodgers can work his magic even with receivers that aren't named Garrett Wilson enough for this team to at least look competent, be there. I'd pick the 49ers in this game, but I think it'll at least be a really good game as long as the Jets offensive line can hold up. And I think that that's what I'm really hoping for the most, because like you said, I think Jets are on prime time for like another 5 games this season. So we might as well see them play to their best and get some good football out of it. But I think they can. It just all comes down to that offensive line. We've talked so much about it since a year ago, honestly, because we knew that they were going to have to make these changes. So like you said at the very top of the show, now it's time to play some football. Now it's time to see if those changes actually manifest into a much better team than they were last year. Plus factor, who you got?
Along that same vein, we're going to keep talking about the Jets offensive line because it's Tyron Smith. And you sign an all-pro left tackle who hasn't had a healthy season since 2015, I believe. Hasn't played a full season since then. And the good news for the Jets is that they did draft Troy Fautanu, and you have him as a way of, or is it Olafashanu?
No, Olafashanu. Yeah.
Olafashanu. Yeah. There were a lot of there was so many of like Fashanu, similar names in this
Fautanu,
draft.
Fuanga,
Olafashanu to back up Tyron Smith, because it's not an if with Tyron Smith, it's a when. When he is on the field, phenomenal blocker. He had the best pass blocking grade in the year in the league last year. He allowed 1 sack. He did allow 18 hurries. Aaron Rodgers does not like to be hurried. But you do have a contingency plan there for when Tyron Smith goes down, because he will, unfortunately, as good of a player as he is. So I appreciate that the Jets doubled down on the left tackle investment there. But for this game in particular, Tyron Smith is going to be crucial because that offensive line is going to be crucial.
Yeah, I agree. And I love that the fact that they continued to go with offensive line, despite bringing in 2 new offensive linemen. I think that that's a good short-term and long-term strategy, honestly, for them with that first-round pick, getting Fashanu in there. My plus factor is Will McDonald. A lot of the drama is coming around with Hassan Reddick. It doesn't look like he's playing week 1. It doesn't look like he's playing any time in the near future. So somebody else has got to step up. And I think that Will McDonald is somebody who can do that, take that second-year leap. Just didn't get a lot of time playing last year. Had an elite passing grade this preseason. Now, it wasn't on a lot of snaps, but still, he was able to play really well. And when you look at this 49ers offensive line, I think a lot of people talk about, they're so good in both of the trenches. Look, they got Trent Williams. And Trent Williams is sick. One of the best offensive tackles in the game, but he's the only offensive lineman on the team last year that had a pass blocking grade above 60. Nobody else had a pass blocking grade above 60. So this matchup, if McDonald's not going up against Trent Williams, it's pretty ripe for them. They're going to be able to get after Brock Purdy. They're going to be able to pressure him. And so I think the Jets defensive line in totality is fantastic. And so it's going to be one of the areas where I think this is sort of like understated, under talked about, not talked about enough, however you want to say it, is the Jets might really have this advantage along the offensive line with how deep and how good their defensive line is. So I think Will McDonald could have a couple of plays in this game that could really be a game record for them. There we go. Woo!
Wow. Woo. We did it.
A lot of games. A lot of games. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the first of the PFF preview shows. Carmen and I are going to be here with you every single Thursday, doing exactly what we did today, previewing every single matchup, giving you the matchups that matter, PFF style, and then, of course, giving you the plus factors as well to help give you a better understanding of what you're going to see this weekend, whether you're betting on it, whether you're just watching it for enjoyment, whether you're just really hoping that your team wins, whatever it is, we're going to be here for you. Carmen, one show down. How's it feel? How do you feel?
Great. Honestly.
I think this was so much fun. This was so much fun. I appreciate it. This is great. This is not that I thought that it wasn't going to be great, but this is giving me so much excitement for every single Thursday because I'm going to be watching games throughout the week and I'm going to be like, yeah, I can't wait to talk about their matchup next week. So I appreciate you coming on. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here all season long.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. Football is back on Thursday. It is Thursday, but it's also today, like Carmen yelled at me at the beginning of the show. I have to say that it's kickoff. Enjoy kickoff. However you are watching the beginning of NFL season, we're excited about it too. Make sure you check in here every single Thursday to preview every single week here with us. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That is Carmen Vitali. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening to PFF's NFL preview show. Enjoy the weekend. We'll see you next week.